What's good? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we're back with another episode, and this time we got the infamous Asadullah Ali. Fahad, who is he?
So Asadullah Ali, he's actually a friend of mine. We met in real life when he came to Ohio State University to have a couple of events over there. So those events went really, really well, and we became friends ever since. I'll just read about Asadullah from his website. Asadullah Ali Al-Andalusi is a research fellow for Yaqeen Institute, member of the Muslim Debate Initiative, and founder of the Andalusian Project, an independent research platform for Islamic Studies. He holds degrees in both Western and Islamic philosophy and is currently pursuing his master's in library and information science. He specializes in topics related to the philosophy of science, atheism, terrorism, Islamic ethics, and other issues facing the global Muslim community. Asadullah, welcome to the show.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. How are you?
Good, Alhamdulillah.
So we're good. So go ahead, Fahad.
Ammar, you want to say something?
No, I was going to say the way I heard about you was from Facebook posts of where you would just refute atheist stuff and ex-Muslims. That was pretty awesome. So I was like, all right, now we get to dig into your brain a little bit today.
Cool.
Yeah, I came across you about a year ago as well from Facebook.
Well, it's nice. Yeah, it was nice meeting you guys, and it was fun going to OSU. And I kind of miss go. I wish I can go back, but you guys kind of went dark.
Now we'll plan something. We'll plan something in the future, inshallah.
Inshallah.
So, biggest question that people need to know. People are going to end up, the listeners, okay, if they're not fathers already, they're going to end up becoming fathers. And oftentimes, our listeners are also siblings. They have siblings. They have parents. They have relatives. And more often than not, you hear of people within your community leaving Islam or becoming quote-unquote free thinkers or atheists or agnostics or deists or Christians or people leaving Islam. So my question to you is, why do Muslims leave Islam, particularly in the West?
Well, there are a number of factors, and that could extend beyond this conversation. And I don't even think there's enough time to address everything in detail. Much of it has to do with emotional reasons, personal experiences with other Muslims, negative ones, personal experiences with the host country that a lot of Muslims are migrating to, like in the West, seeing the advances in technology and the superiority of certain policies or domestic issues or the organization of society in comparison to their home country. And just being seeped in Western culture in general without much of an Islamic example, a superior Islamic example to compare it to. Those are all factors which move people towards rejecting the faith. And ex-Muslims themselves will say that they're intellectual reasons, although of course I would disagree with that. But they usually cite certain arguments or quote-unquote errors in the faith or moral issues within the faith that lead them away. Although from my own personal experience, I've noticed that these are mostly rationalizations rather than and justifications for having already left, and not necessarily the prime motivators. So yeah, I mean those would be like that's the gist of it. I don't know if that's too concise for you.
So no, concise, you mentioned emotional reasons, right? Mm-hmm. Could you give examples of emotional reasons? It would something be like, oh, my dad didn't let me go to prom growing up. I couldn't have a boyfriend. Is something like that a reason?
Yeah, I mean, it's rather holistic in the sense that, like I said, when you're seeped into another culture, you feel restricted because that culture practices a certain lifestyle or certain lifestyles different from the one that your parents typically want for you. So in a way, it's moving away from the one that you grew up in is not only a form of rebellion, but other lifestyles look more enticing when you're told that you can't participate in them. So in a way, there's a sense of freedom for moving away from your own faith. Of course, it is rather superficial because it doesn't take into account the real value, the axiological or the ontological value of the particular lifestyle that you're practicing, it's sort of a reactionary thing. And in that way, it's emotional. And the other way emotions sort of tie into that is rebellion, not just against your parents, because, you know, even though a lot of ex-Muslims are quite young, that's part of it. But the other part is like rebelling against your own culture, your own given identity. Because when something's imposed on you from birth, you know, you feel a need to sort of break away from it sometimes, especially if you feel a burden. And that can always, and that burden can be felt through personal experience with one's parents, friends, or other family members, or this community in general. So being slighted in any such way can sort of move somebody towards another direction, and it's quite natural to feel that way. But I'm not really concerned necessarily about the motivating factors, because I feel like a lot of the motivating factors that lead people to become ex-Muslims are largely uncontrollable. What I mean to say is, like, you can't control the behavior of everyone around you.
Right.
You know, you can't control a lot of your situations in life. You know, you can tell other Muslims you need to be nice to people so they don't leave the faith, but that's not always going to stick. You know, a lot of the responsibility is on the individual. So I like to focus a lot on the psychological and the rational factors that they claim motivated them, and that they largely use to rationalize and justify them leaving, because that's really where their responsibility lies. You know, like I said, you can't control how your parents act. You can't control how other people act. You know, if you experience those negative things, you experience those negative things. And that's just largely out of your control. So I like to focus on things that you can control. So that's why I don't really focus on those emotional aspects. I focus on the arguments they use and the rationalizations they use, and see if those are valid or not. Yeah.
Can we get into some of those arguments that they might use? Like,
yeah,
like what's the common one?
Yeah, recently I posted about what I call the ex-Muslim trump card. You know, they do like to focus a lot on morals and things like this, and what they consider to be theological problems. Well, theology is probably the least of their concerns. But most of all, they love to focus on the quote-unquote scientific errors in the Quran and in Islamic scholarship in general. This is their trump card. That tends to be the primary rationalization behind why they left the faith. Although this, like I said, this is always post hoc. It's something that they only started to look into after they left, or after they wanted to leave, and now they're saying, "Oh, this is the reason why I left." Because most of the time you can catch them; they don't even know what they're reading half the time. So, for example, like I said, the scientific miracles is the biggest thing that they go into, and it's very easy to refute, because it's basically just one big straw man of how the Quran is supposed to be read. Traditional scholarship for the past 1400 years has generally read the Quran in a non-scientific way, and it's only recently become popularized on the 19th, 20th century, after Muslims were becoming colonized and the Ottoman Empire was falling. It was a form of compensating for the inferiority complex that Muslims were getting. So, you know, when you can see science in the Quran, now you don't have to tell everyone that, oh yeah, we're a religion, or our culture is inferior to the West. Discovered all these things because it was already in the Quran, you know, 1400 years ago. We don't have to worry about catching up anymore, you know, because we're on par with them. And that's the reason it's really become popular, is to sort of compensate for this inferiority that a lot of Muslims feel. And a lot of ex-Muslims who left the faith, you know, they kind of were brought up in that culture where this was a primary argument that was also used. So it's also very much the fault of the Muslims in this respect. But it's really largely a straw man of the Islamic scholarly tradition and how the Quran should be generally read. And even
kind of the Muslims' fault as well for doing this, because they kind of propagate this.
No, this is the primary of the Muslims, the Ummah's fault in many respects, but it's not the scholarly tradition. It isn't the scholars' fault necessarily. Most scholars rejected this form of exegesis long before it became popular, and even afterwards. You know, today you have a lot of Muslim scholars and da'is who are on the offensive against this methodology, this approach, and yet ex-Muslims refuse to address those criticisms, refuse to address what Muslims actually believe in this respect, and they prefer to attack low-hanging fruit. You know, they like to go after Zakir Naik a lot because of his large following, but they don't go after everyone else. I mean, they certainly don't go after my work, even though I don't even adopt that approach at all. So, you know, that's one of the things they use. But you also notice that even when they try to critique the Quran in this way, by attacking this methodology, they don't really understand what they're reading. So recently, you know, I posted something about this issue, and an individual, I think it was an ex-Muslim, came into my post, and they wanted to show, well, even if the Quran doesn't address scientific, it still has scientific errors, right? And what the example they gave me showcases sort of the lack of reading comprehension and critical thinking involved in a lot of these critiques. So, for example, the passage that they mentioned was, let me see here. Let me just read it out real quick. Surah 86, ayahs 6 through 7. And in those ayats, if you happen to recall, it basically says man is created from a spurting fluid issuing from between the backbone and the ribs. And, so their whole entire reading of this was quite fascinating to me because it was so horribly wrong. So the passage is very clear. It says man is created from a fluid that comes from between the backbone and the ribs, right? And their reading of that passage was that the fluid comes from the backbone and from the ribs.
Right.
So
but not even that. I bet not even the Arabs at that time, they would have interpreted it like.
No, not even that. But just the funny thing is that the Arabic word for between here is baini, which is between, like for us, it's the space between two objects or two things, right? So their reading of it was that the fluid comes from the backbone and from the ribs. Never mind the fact that the backbone and the ribs here are interpreted in a very different way as well by the early Arabs, because for them, they didn't have modern medical terminology. So for them, the backbone could probably mean like a whole section of the body that was not simply that one, like the spinal. It wasn't just the spine. It was like a very large portion of the back area of the human being. And the ribs were not just, the ribs that we consider today. It's also the chest bone. So,
and I would imagine that this claim wouldn't be the first time that this claim is even being made, because even the Arabs, they knew that if like you were to castrate a camel, for example, it wouldn't be able to make sperm.
Yeah, I mean they understood these things, but the passage is very simple. It's just saying that the fluid comes from within the body.
Yeah, exactly.
That's basically what it's saying. That's all it's saying. Okay, because there were some myths back then that it actually did come from particular areas like the backbone of the ribs, and the Quran was just correcting that and saying, no, it comes from within the body, okay, between those areas. But the ex-Muslims, they read it as though from, so showcasing their lack of reading comprehension, understanding of basic words, because when you have to completely erase the word between there in order to make your point, it showcases that you really don't know what you're talking about. You've never read anything in your entire life. So, these very simplistic, sort of ludicrous ideas and arguments that are being proposed in order to rationalize their views. And when you even bring up the fact that this approach, this whole scientific miracles approach, just came about recently, like in the past 100, 150 years, it doesn't phase me for some reason.
The ex-Muslim, he would challenge you by saying that between the backbone and the ribs, well, that's like your heart, that's your lungs area, for example.
Well, no, because the space between is like, it doesn't have to be the same proportion as the objects themselves. I mean, for them, like I said, if you look at how the Arabs were speaking back then, for them, the backbone and the ribs, just the backbone was basically your entire back. The ribs was basically your entire front portion of your body. So they weren't trying to be anatomically correct in accordance with modern medical terminology. That's not.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that so that's what I'm trying to say is like, not only is the objective of the Quran not to give scientific information, but a general statement like that can be so easily twisted by these individuals desperate to find a rationalization for the rejection of their faith. So this is something that I point out recently, and this is why I also typically don't find a lot of ex-Muslims' arguments to be very convincing, because they're typically very simplistic, rather juvenile, and also very reactive.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question. You mentioned the scientific, like you mentioned that a lot of these guys, their arguments are simplistic and they focus on scientific critiques, right, or the scientific method.
Yeah.
So you mentioned why is it the standard of truth is measured by the scientific method?
Well, that's also a very recent thing as well, because even during prior to the Enlightenment period, or even during the Enlightenment period, it was still very contentious. But during the Enlightenment period and prior, science was never really the measure of everything. That didn't really start coming about until the positivist movement around the 17th, 18th century, 18th century primarily. Well, that's pre-positivism, so we'll say a little later than that. But the whole idea that science is the measure of all things is really a very recent development. post-Enlightenment. And today, you know, even among the lay population around the world, whether they be Muslim or non-Muslim, science is considered to be like the authority on all things knowledge. And like I said, it's a very recent trend in human thinking. Some people say it's for the better. I don't necessarily think that's the case. Maybe in certain respects, like when it actually comes to subjects that are science-based and technology-based. But when it comes to like sociology, religion, and claims that fall outside of that realm, it's a very dangerous belief to have, because it reduces everything to sort of physical phenomena, which, you know, is quite impossible if you really think about it. Yeah.
What are some of the other challenges that people might have that, like, so have you dealt with any like, I don't even know how to say it. So have any people ever reached out to you to ask them, like, oh, my son, he's no longer a Muslim anymore?
Several times.
Something along the lines of that. So what are the most common contentions that they would have?
And how do you deal with them?
Number one is scientific miracles, scientific errors, quote unquote. Number two is also related to science in some way, but basically, why is the Muslim world not as advanced as the West? Then number three usually has to do with violence. Like, why are there so many terrorists in the Muslim world? And then finally, I guess you could say, with the moral objections to like women's rights and things. Actually, it's quite funny, because most of the time that I get approached, even by ex-Muslims themselves, women's issues, things like that, you think that they would be like a main thing, but that's actually their least concern. They do bring it up, but it's actually the last thing they bring up. And largely because I think a lot of them are quite sexist themselves, and they really don't care. No, I'm being frank, you know, because they come from, a lot of these ex-Muslims come from certain cultures or certain areas within that culture that do mistreat women quite a bit and use Islam to justify it erroneously. But so their sentiments towards women are already quite bad, so they don't see many problems with it. They like to use it as like a stick to beat Muslims over the head with, you know, oh, well, how you treat women. But in general, they themselves and their own families treat women quite poorly. You just go to the ex-Muslim Reddit, you can find all sorts of horrible speech towards, especially ex-Muslim sisters there, who often, I won't say sisters, but, you know, women who complain about their treatment by other ex-Muslim males. Actually, I even posted a thread about that recently as well on my Facebook post about all the sexual harassment that a lot of these girls endure. And I have been approached, and I'm not going to name names here, but I have been approached by the wives of ex-Muslims in the past, particularly prominent ones. I and some other individuals have been approached by some of the wives of some of these ex-Muslim figures, and they've complained of abuse, domestic abuse, emotional blackmail, theft.
Why would they come to you?
Well, because they're still Muslims.
Oh, okay. But like, why would they come to you?
Okay, well, myself and there's a Dawah community, and they know us because we're the only ones who are responding to a lot of these online ex-Muslims.
Yeah.
So they find us through videos or through network, and then they go, okay, I need help with this. Can you please help change my husband or something? And that's generally how the discussion starts. And then what happens is that they go into detail. And then you realize that these women are getting beat, that they're getting pushed out of their homes, that because they oppose their husband's atheism.
Because they didn't give in.
And their husbands are like emotionally blackmailing them, refusing to give them money if they don't become atheist. I'm not joking. Like, it's really bad. There are actually some people, and the reason that I can't speak about their names is because these women I promised these particular sisters that we wouldn't say anything in protection for themselves and also for their own families and their children. But some of them have even gone so far as to basically leave social media altogether because some of their husbands found out that they were speaking to us and threatened. Wow. And we know of one particular moderator of ex-Muslim Reddit, also a prominent figure who I'm not going to name, I'm just going to let you guess, who has gone out of his way to cover up the abuse of a lot of these sisters because he thinks it's bad publicity for the ex-Muslim movement.
Yeah, like it's always It's always like
that's kind of ironic, actually.
Yeah, ironic. I was gonna say because many of these kuffar you see amongst the non-Muslim community as well, like the abuse that they have with their women. That they're not even Muslim, and we see it right all the time with the harassment and stuff.
Well, that's the reason they pick on Islam so much and other Muslims is because they're actually projecting and compensating for their own issues.
Exactly, like they're the ones getting drunk and beating their wives and whatnot.
No, they are, and there are a number of incidents. I'm not saying all of them, but there are a number of prominent ex-Muslims who do these things, and it's actually rising. And we're just waiting for another ex-Muslim within their movement to come out and say something. But it's going to be huge. It's going to be massive. You're going to find out. But you know what's going to happen after that, right? We've already predicted what's going to happen. So once this all gets aired out, all the ex-Muslims everywhere are going to go, oh, you know, it's because he still has Islam in him. That's the reason.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're going to say.
Right? It's still Islam's fault after he left it. That's the reason. Right?
Well, it's like the dumbest thing because, like, you see how protective fathers are of their daughters in the Muslim community, right?
Yeah. I mean, there are some bad apples, obviously. But
yeah, for sure. But it's not like
Islam. But we come out and point them out. We go after them. Like, you know, the whole recent thing with the whole, what was it? Those fraudsters doing the ruqya.
Yeah, exactly.
And
yeah. So we came out after them, right? Muhammad Hijab, all these other individuals. We came out publicly and said these people are frauds, they're horrible, blah blah blah. Ex-Muslims still took advantage of that.
Yeah, they did. They did. It's so messed up.
Dude, they're you.
Yeah.
Why are you?
The guy's an atheist. He literally said, "Yes, I didn't have faith." At this point,
and he was abusing his wives. So that's just one. He was trying to force both of his wives to become atheists through the emotional blackmail and all this other stuff. He was abusing them. So this is just one example that's already been aired out.
Yeah, wow. They're atheists.
Yeah.
I remember listening on Muhammad Hijab's podcast. Or sorry, not Muhammad Hijab, my bad. Muhammad Qilan, his podcast that the main reason why Muslims continue to remain Muslim is because of the Muslim community itself. So it's typically for emotional reasons that people stay Muslim or choose to leave Islam. It's not intellectual reasons.
I mean, the thing is, too, you have to understand that part of it, a large part of it, right? I mean, there are emotional. See, because I would never say that it's necessarily wrong to justify your beliefs through emotion. So let me clarify that real quick. Because the human being is more than just the rational. Yes. There are a lot of things. Humans, spiritual, the emotional, the psychological. There are a lot of factors that are involved in choosing one's belief. And of course, the belief that you choose has to be coherent with all those experiences. Now, my issue with the ex-Muslim community in particular is that they go out of their way to basically go, oh, no, we only left because we're superior. We have superior rationality and logic. We didn't do anything based on emotion or culture or anything like this. But that's obviously nonsense. And they try to make it as though, they're superior because of this. And that's the reason I like to point it out a lot. Now, if your primary reason for staying with a religion is emotional, then I think that is a problem. I think that, of course, it should be balanced out with rational reasons and, justifications. You can't just be like, yeah, because I'm just happy being a Muslim.
Yeah, but the thing is that, most people are not smart, right?
Well, I think most people have the capacity to be. I mean, I think most people are within the level of intelligence that they can rationalize their beliefs in a real, with real justifications, real valid reasoning. The problem is that people refuse to do so. We live in a time period where we have more information than any other time in history at our fingertips. Where everything's accessible to us, and yet there are so many illiterate people out there.
Yeah.
So by their own will, by their own voluntary,
and those people actually they tend to be the most zealous in their faith, right?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, but they
I would
tend
say
to be,
that
right?
people are more certain of themselves in uncompromising fashion, uncharitable fashion, if they happen to be willingly ignorant. So going back to ex-Muslims, for example, you have a lot of individuals who they can't tell you basic points of doctrine in Islam, but they're adamant that Islam is wrong, regardless of that.
Yeah.
And of course, on the other side of the spectrum, you have a lot of individuals who believe Islam wholeheartedly, but they don't even know basic aqidah or even just basic fiqh.
Okay, so So then why do they leave Islam to begin with? It's because of the...
Well, typically, it seems like the similar mentality is simply changing sides. As I pointed out in my recent post as well, the reason that ex-Muslims are so fond of picking on lower-hanging fruit or picking lower-hanging fruit is because they fell from the same branch.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that?
They're on the same level of argument and intellect.
Okay.
When they left, so that's the reason they go after those things, because that's the highest thing they've ever seen. They've never studied beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
You'll never see them you'll never see ex-Muslims attacking the works of Al-Ghazali or Ibn Rushd. Like, they can't. They don't even understand half of what's being read. Like, they do not understand those things. They can't. Well, they refuse.
Yeah, they don't even understand Arabic half the time as well. When they're critiquing the Quran, they're going off like translation.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's okay to go off translation here and there. But my point is, because there's a lot of advanced works and intermediate works even that have been translated that you can read and learn about Islam in depth, but these individuals, they haven't gone that far at all. I mean, like, I love it when you hear, oh yeah, I've studied the Quran. I read it 3 times in my life. It's like, what? Like, it takes me a day to read it once. Like, what the, or it's like, oh, I've read it 3 times, or I've read Ibn Kathir, which means they've skimmed translation of Ibn Kathir, and then they're like, yeah, I've studied Islam. And it's like, all you have to do is go to their own sources and you see that they're wrong. It's very simple. But yeah, it's a lot of posturing.
Mm-hmm. But then you said that there are 2 reasons that people primarily leave Islam. Is because number one is emotional reasons, and the second one is intellectual reasons, right?
No, I say that the claimed reasons as to why they left. I would say the primary reasons are psychological and emotional.
Emotional, right?
Or
and you said
being seeped into the culture that they're in.
Mm-hmm. And you said that we don't have control over that.
We don't have control over the external factors. Like, so the things that we need to be addressing. So my approach is that I'm not a counselor. I mean, I can sit down and I can counsel people to an extent, but I'm not a trained counselor. Like, if you came to me and you had a psychological problem or you had an emotional trauma, I can't sit here and be like, solve your issue. That's something that requires a professional. But when it comes to things that I think are within your control, within your responsibility, more so at least, are the justifications that you use for leaving a faith. So, for example, if your justifications don't have any logical backing, then it's not a justification. If you have no rational means for leaving, then it's not rational, right? And that's really within the control of the individual. That's something that people can control. And they choose either to do so or not to do so. So that's what I typically address. And I think that's what many da'is should be addressing, and not trying to go, oh yeah, well, if we address these psychological issues, yeah, you can talk about them, but if you're not a professional, you're not going to help somebody who's like suffering from bipolar disorder. I can't.
Yeah, but there are other psychological issues that you can kind of control. Like, have you seen like Prager University by any chance?
Yeah, I watch them occasionally for entertainment.
Yeah.
So
the reason I bring them up is because Prager University, they form a sort of
the conservative
intellectual community for conservative people.
Yeah, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, they make conservatives feel like as if they're not stupid, entirely stupid.
Well, that's fun.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I was thinking about having Muslims do something similar.
Like, he's talking about like the format, like the idea of those little small videos where they talk about statistics and stuff.
Well, I mean, there are groups out there that are already doing that, to an extent. There's like, Yaqeen Institute and others who are starting to pick up this, this sort of intellectual space has really started to become developed online by the Muslim community. It's still sort of in its early phase, but it's picking up a lot of steam. Unfortunately, Muslims are largely. The problem is not necessarily the spaces, though. I mean, like, the spaces are being developed, but the problem is that Muslims themselves don't really. You have a group in the Muslim community that wants these spaces, and you have another group in the community who doesn't care.
Yeah, it doesn't care. Both don't care.
That think that it's not necessary to have these spaces.
Yeah.
Because they live in a little bubble,
They're kind of naive.
Or wherever, India or something, where they feel like their Muslims are the majority, so they don't need to do anything, but they don't see what's going on everywhere else. So they, we don't need to address these arguments because we just ignore them; they'll go away. And then they wonder why their cousin or their brother or their sister becoming an ex-Muslim. They're like, why is this happening?
Then they take them for ruqya.
And they take them for ruqya, or they just play the Quran on the max volume and hope that does something.
Yeah.
So regarding this topic of why they're leaving, and you said you should focus on what we can control and what they can control. So how do you go about setting like a stronger base for them to not go for these pitfalls? Like would it be like, hey, we don't evaluate truth by the scientific method? Like what kind of values would you instill in someone when you're teaching them about Islam?
Or what kind of curriculum would you, or what kind of curriculum would you enforce on?
First off, I think the large problem is that a lot of the younger Muslim community, especially in the West, they're constantly being thrown into secular society. It's constantly bombarding them, so they don't really have a choice but to address what they're seeing and what they're experiencing on a daily basis. Unfortunately, within the Muslim community, the minority community, or even the majority community, there is a lack of concern for addressing these issues or learning about these things. There's a lot of the strategy for a lot of Muslims, especially the first generation immigrants, is simply to ignore or to focus their attention elsewhere and hope that it kind of goes away.
Evolution is haram.
Yeah,
You're not allowed to think like that.
One answer, one line responses, and just say ignore it. Same thing, even with sex. The same thing, like don't think about it. You're good. That's how we solve it, right? And that may work back home because you're surrounded by a lot of other Muslims who are there to constantly remind you. And
the culture tells you to believe in Allah, right?
But when you're surrounded by 99% of the population that doesn't have those same values, it's a little bit more difficult. So one of the things that I've sort of vied for in the past several years is that Muslims need to start learning philosophy, and I've been met with a lot of pushback, especially by the older generations who claim that philosophy is haram. And it's like, okay, well, if philosophy is haram, how do you expect to learn about the philosophies that you're engaging with?
So those philosophies are haram too.
Yeah, well, they may be haram, but how do you know how to address them? How can you address them if you don't understand what they are? It's like saying, well, we're going to go to war with this one nation over here, but we don't know anything about them. We don't want to know anything about them. We don't know what weapons they have, and we don't care. It's like, well, that's not going to help you. You need to tell about what you're experiencing before you.
I think what they say. Well, I don't know which ones you talked to, but like from what I know, I've learned that it's haram when you're like when it comes to the sifat of Allah, but when it comes to these ideologies, you need it, right? Like feminism is liberalism is a type of philosophy.
And they say, well, you're going to become an ex-Muslim. It's like, I have never met one ex-Muslim that took a philosophy course.
Yeah, I never met one ex-Muslim who took a philosophy course.
I mean, maybe
that's interesting because
but the majority of ex-Muslims I see online, they don't know like basic logical fallacies. Like they've never been in a philosophy. Or they've been in the philosophy 101 course. They think because they've read Descartes or Hume, now all of a sudden they know everything about philosophy. And they're basically just idiots.
So okay, so you say he said something very similar. Like basically, just don't take your philosophy 101, or if you're gonna go delve into philosophy, take the philosophy of science and like specialize in something and like go full.
But what I said, I think I said to you earlier was that when we met is like if you're gonna take philosophy, don't think that you've learned everything just because you've taken one course.
Right.
Like everything that you're being shown is just basic stuff. Like you have to understand that. Philosophy, the field of philosophy has gone on for generations, and there have been people who have responded to the people that you're reading. And unless you read what they've said, you shouldn't be certain about what you're reading, because for every major philosopher out there, there's somebody who refuted them or who has tried. And it's just an ongoing discourse. Not one philosophy is completely set in stone. As the definitive answer to everything, and so it's always funny when I find like, oh yeah, I read Freud, who's a psychologist really, but I read Hume and I read Descartes, so now I know I know that Islam is wrong, religion's bad. I'm like, and I always look at these people, I'm like, are you stupid? Have you ever read Heidegger? No, I've never read Heidegger. Of course, you never read Heidegger because you think Descartes was something special. That's what I mean. It's
like the Dunning-Kruger effect. Or if you're familiar with that, it's like when you don't know much about a subject, like your confidence in the subject is really small. But then as soon as you learn a little bit more, your confidence skyrockets. Like, oh, I know everything. As soon as you finish the intro course, you think you know everything. Yeah. And then as soon as you learn more and you become more proficient in it, your confidence in that subject starts to decrease and starts
very shallow.
And then it starts to increase back up after you've done it for like 20 years.
Yeah, and I don't want to just pick on ex-Muslims here. It's really sort of a cross-cultural, cross-demographic issue. Because we live in a world now where shallow thinking is sort of, how should I say, promoted and honored. People don't like to read beyond a few paragraphs, and they think that if you write or speak more than what is needed, quote unquote, in accordance with most people's attention span today, that means that you're speaking nonsense. So there's these default views now that being erudite and having the sophisticated position is somehow indicative of nonsense, which showcases how stupid a lot of people are now. And what I mean by stupid is not necessarily lack of intelligence, but willful ignorance.
Right. And that's why I like the podcast setting a lot. That's why I like the podcast setting is because
it helps to go into nuance
a little bit more.
But that's why you'll see amongst ex-Muslims, they're very popular on the internet mostly, and not within academic communities, is because on the internet, sound bites and shallow information are considered to be scholarship. What I like to refer to, and this may be very rude to a lot of people, but what I like to refer to as the intellectual peasantry. The peasants have risen up against the nobles of the intellectual world in the academia, and they have claimed now the territory of the internet as their dominion, and now they've risen up against their masters. And
that's what we're going to title this podcast. We're going to call it intellectual peasantry.
No, and it's funny because they say, and then they claim their leaders are now their guides, like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris, who are themselves intellectual peasants, and
they're not that smart.
well, I like to call them the bards of the intellectual peasantry. The individuals who are very good at speaking but have lacked a lot of substance. So, Trump is to his base. He convinces them with the most vague and stupid words, but he doesn't know because he's very confident. And in the same way, and maybe that's too insulting to Sam Harris and et cetera, because they do speak a little better than Trump does. But there's a lack of substance there. They mostly wow people with the way that they use their words, and they wow people based on sort of the shock factor and making very extreme claims about religion and religious people.
Do you have any examples of that, like off the top of your head?
Well, Sam Harris in particular is very fond of a lot of his thought experiments, where he likes to basically put Muslims in this camp where, if it goes far enough, we're just going to take over the world and kill everyone, or if Islamists come into power, which happen to be like the majority of us for some reason. Same thing with Ben Shapiro. Like, he thinks that the majority of Muslims are radicals. You saw that video on PagerView.
Yeah, I saw it.
Because we want adultery to be punished, so that must mean we're all with ISIS. It's like, no. It's like
it's like they'll be so nuanced about every single topic, right? When it comes to every topic, but then when it comes to Islam, there's like no nuance.
Not even that. I don't give them that much credit. I'm sorry. They're not even nuanced in other subjects. It's funny. They do call for nuance when they're being critiqued.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
When they are expressing their own opinions, it's like memery. It's just a meme. Just like, well, this is stupid because, one of the things.
Fight fire with fire. We need to have like an army of Muslim meme makers.
Well, I don't really want to sink to that level. That's the thing, is because I feel like that's the sort of culture I'm trying to.
I mean, if that's working,
it's working, but it's working in a bad way. It's working for those who. It's sort of like a power play by idiots. So, so for example, mobs, a riot. Right, very effective at destroying things. If you get a mob together, a bunch of idiots with pitchforks and torches, but that's not exactly the model society you want. You know what I mean? Eventually, that crumbles.
Give them like hammers and power tools and stuff, and
but that eventually will crumble on itself because it's not sustainable. And that's what I'm trying to say, is that the sort of knowledge that is promoted on the internet these days by the majority of people, and even like the ex-Muslim movement, it's not sustainable. It's a phase. it'll have a large amount of momentum, but then eventually it's going to fizzle because it's not long lasting. Like people are still going to be reading Al-Ghazali 100 years from now. Nobody's going to be reading some idiot ex-Muslim on YouTube or watching his videos 100 years from. Nobody's going to give a crap about them. Like Armin Navabi.
Like the Lindy effect, right?
I'm going to bring up this too because Armin Navabi brought up this really funny like meme, for example, got a lot of traction online. Going back to the whole simplistic, arguments, etc. He's like, you don't need to read, you don't need to read myths to know that they're nonsense or something. And like he said something about like Harry Potter, I don't know, like some fiction books. You don't need to read Harry Potter to know it's fiction and it's nonsense, right? You don't need to read these things in depth. You need to learn about them to know that they're nonsense. That's basically his argument in a nutshell. And he was arguing against this idea that a lot of Muslims who come back and say, you need a PhD to properly critique the subject. So that's his response. And of course, it's stupid because even if you think something is fiction, right? Say let's use the simple example like Harry Potter, right? Just because I know Harry Potter's fiction doesn't mean that I don't have to read it in order to talk about it with authority. Do you see? I'm like, I need to read Harry Potter to know what's in the book. Like, I need to know if I come out and just start saying random crap about the book Harry Potter that's not even in the book, and then my justification is, well, I don't need to read it to know it's stupid. Like that is not a justification for me being ignorant about the subject that I'm talking about. Imagine somebody came up and said about evolution to these people, well, I don't need to read anything on evolution to know it's nonsense. And
for example, I learned about evolution in school, but I didn't read The Origin of Species.
Well, yeah, I mean,
but I know what it's about.
Sort of authority, right? So, for example, if I start saying that, humans come from monkeys, that's what evolution says, and then evolution, or somebody who follows the theory corrects me and says, no, that's not what evolution says about common ancestry, and I go, well, I don't need to learn about evolution to know it's nonsense. That's my response. That looks like a cop-out from my own ignorance. And of course, they're going to, anybody listening to this podcast, ex-Muslim, they're going to say, well, you can't compare evolution to religion and blah, blah, blah. And of course, that's also nonsensical. That's irrelevant to the objection. The point is that regardless of whether you believe in something or not, you need to actually study the thing if you want to properly critique it with any integrity. And the thing that Muslims are complaining about is that the reason that we're saying you need a PhD or you need some academic qualifications is because ex-Muslims, in particular Islamophobes, keep making stupid arguments that have nothing to do with our beliefs. That's the reason why. And if they don't want us to say that, maybe they need to start learning about the things that they're talking about.
Right, but I would say that you have to study the Quran properly.
Yeah,
if
you have to learn how to read.
If you're trying to make claims about what's inside of the Quran, but if you're talking about what's outside of it, whether it's from God or not, I don't think you necessarily need a PhD in it. Right.
Well, the thing is, you have to be somewhat educated to have even a deep discussion about certain things. I mean, what are we talking about in particular? So for example, if you want to talk about fiqh, what are the laws pertaining to women or pertaining to minority rights, et cetera, punishments? You can't just, open up on CNN. So I'm going to go talk to a scholar and try to refute him. It's that's not how it works.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the idea that they have in their head, that, this is how it's going to go. That they can just learn everything in a few minutes and then go after somebody who studied the subject for 20 years and just completely run over them. No, that's arrogance mixed with just a profound amount of stupidity.
100%.
Yeah.
You find Muslims like that too, that have a problem with the tradition. But the point you bring out is a crucial one, I think, where you mention how there's a whole usul and fiqh, right? Where you derive the laws, you derive the rulings. So to critique even one ruling, you need to know how they got to that conclusion before you just critique it.
Yeah, and it's fine if you want to reject something based on a simplistic understanding. Say if you, I reject Christianity based on certain theological issues.
Yeah.
But on those issues is what I will argue. Only those issues. I won't go after everything else in Christianity, not having learned about it. And I definitely won't go marching up to the Vatican and try to argue with the Pope.
Mm-hmm.
I know more than you, Mr. Pope, about everything that I'm talking about. No, I'm not stupid. Now there's a point, that I will come from where I'm saying I don't believe the Trinity is correct because I think it's theologically invalid. I think that there are some logical inconsistencies there, and I do feel that it's incoherent. And on that level, I can disagree with him. But if I'm going to go in and be like, yeah, you know, Christianity's views on women, when I haven't studied the subject, right, in depth. But this is how a lot of these people act. They'll go, look, well, let me go look up something that confirms my bias. Go read a Wikipedia article for 5 minutes, and then they try to go after people who have PhDs in the subject. They're idiots.
Yeah, right. I agree with that. Like, and you even see it with yourself, right? With people checking out of debates with you most of the time.
It's happened a few times, you know, and it's actually kind of made me mad because partly it confirms a lot about these people, but I wish I had a larger base so that it could be sort of marketed that these people are cowards. Unfortunately, I don't, so it's easy for them to run away and kind of have this sort of, you know, not really noticed. But, you know, when I've gone after Robert Spencer and David Wood and they've reneged on debates with me, and Brother Fahad, you're very much aware of what happened with Robert Spencer. I'm hoping to release that video pretty soon, by the way. It's been a long time, but, you know, the moment that they learn that I know more than they do, and I'm very proud to say that I don't care because it's true. They can call it arrogant all they want, but I've educated myself. I humbled myself for several years at a university. I have a right to say that, and if they don't like it, then kiss my ass. You know, so I'm sorry, excuse my French. You know, but my point is that, you know, these individuals are so arrogant that they're willing to talk down to me and other people who have studied more than they have. And when challenged on a fair academic platform, they make so many excuses just to back out of it. You know, the fact that Robert Spencer, for example, and this is one of the biggest insults I've ever had in my life, and it was expected, but it was still insulting. You remember, we offered him a fair platform at OSU, at Ohio State University, one of the largest universities in the country. Okay, security, free security, travel, everything he complains about not getting, because he always complains on Twitter that nobody wants to invite him to universities. They're trying to censor him. We invite him, give him a red carpet. What happens? He claims that we're a security risk. He claims that the MSA, the students at OSU, Muslim students, are a security risk for him.
Then the main thing is that he asked for like $20,000.
$20,000 for his own personal security, which you don't even need for personal security, to protect himself from all these evil possible terrorists in the MSA.
Yeah, but the guy, he's had a assassination attempt on him once, he claims.
In Iceland, which is not even true. It was about some stupid thing with like some guy put ecstasy in his drink, and then
so trying to get him to party.
Yeah, and then yeah, he was I think it was in, where was it, Texas or somewhere. He had like some Draw Muhammad Day thing, and these two lone wolf idiots went and tried to kill him, and then the FBI basically took him down. You know, so nothing actually happened. They shot at the building or whatever, but nobody got hurt.
No, well, that's a pretty big thing, though.
It is a big thing, but think about it. Was that a university? Was there security everywhere? Was it like, you know, I mean, look, why the heck would we invite and spend money on a guy to come in just so we could kill him? Like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to waste my time. You know, I'm not there. I want him to be alive. I want to embarrass him in front of people. I don't want to kill him. I'm not going to waste my precious life going to jail for some idiot like him. I mean, no, okay, don't flatter yourself, Robert. Okay, I have more important things to do with my time than worry about your life. All right, seriously. And this is the thing that he doesn't get. He wants to make, this is an excuse, like I said. And let's look at it from a principle, like the matter of principle. Okay, if you were anything like a man, okay, you wouldn't require $20,000 for your convictions. If you had any semblance of testicles, okay, you wouldn't sit here and claim that you need security so you can speak about your beliefs in an intellectual manner on an intellectual platform at a university. If you're not willing to die for your free speech and expression, or even, you know, somebody yelling at you or something, then I'm sorry, you don't have convictions. You don't deserve to have convictions, and you may as well just go cower somewhere else and never speak again. Because, you know, for me, like you're not worth your words. And maybe that's a hard thing to ask for a lot of people. Like, you know, they don't want to risk their lives and stuff. But like I said, for somebody to come out and say he's brave and that he's trying to help Western civilization, he's fighting for free speech and everything and free expression. Yeah.
Oh, crap.
Like, no, he's not. He's fighting for himself. he's posturing, and he's just a little weasel. No, it's true. I mean, he can come out and he can say, "Oh, the Muslims are being mean to me." It's like, well, you deserve it. You don't deserve respect when you don't have any dignity for yourself or anybody else. Like, and I'm sorry to go on a rant about him, but it infuriates me that people think these sort of people are brave and have anything intellectual to offer when they have zero integrity and they don't even have enough courage to stand up on a fair platform at a university to debate their ideas. He has to go scurry away in some church with private security because he thinks he's in such danger. Wow. Pathetic. And I'm sorry if that was too much, but for me, it's really pathetic.
I agree with you 100%. 100%.
I'm being blunt and I'm sorry if I'm using certain words, but I want to be very frank here that these people, anyone who looks up to these individuals has no integrity, has no principle. They're not an ethical person, as far as I'm concerned. I have never asked for a fee speaking out against ISIS when I was overseas. Okay, when they called me to go give speeches at universities or places where there were actually ISIS members in the crowd and who wanted to kill me, I didn't go, "Hey, I need $20,000 for you guys to give me security before I go there."
Wait, is that confirmed that there were ISIS members in the crowd where you were speaking at in Malaysia?
There were some members who were watching me, yes, and I got threatened personally by a few of them. So
how did they threaten you?
To my face.
Wait, what? They were like, "Yeah, we're gonna kill you. Shut up, or you're gonna
no,
die."
Well, first off, it was very subtle. So first off, they were basically like, "I don't think you should speak, brother, because it's a very sensitive subject." And I tried to explain to them that no, it needs to be said. And then that conversation eventually blew up to the extent where it was like, if you talk, you're gonna find yourself dead. And so,
they said that?
Huh? Yeah. I mean, it was more graphic than that. Like one guy basically said, I will saw your head off. So, and I kind of stood up to him and he just shouted and kind of backed off with his friends, but you can tell who was who.
Wait, how many people were there? Can you describe this incident a little bit more?
It was a group of like 4 people. It's not. I mean,
where were they from?
They're Syrians.
Oh snap!
Oh god!
So
okay, what are they doing in Malaysia?
Studying.
What?
Studying at the university.
Oh damn.
So no, I mean they got rooted out eventually. When the crackdown happened in Malaysia, those individuals were arrested and deported.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there were members of, like, what I'm trying to say is that, look, I don't think I'm
asking the game
much. Yes, our lives are important, our families' lives are important, but if you're coming out here and you're trying to act like you're a brave man and you're trying to fight for free expression and free speech in the face of danger, in the face of violence, and you're trying to promote all of these things, and you're trying to be like this idol for people, and then you come out and you're like, I can't go over there because they're going to kill me. It's like, you look like a complete clown. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Like,
100%.
Yeah, like you have to put your skin in the game if you're really like.
Yeah, it's like, imagine if Martin Luther King was like, yeah, I'm fighting for civil rights and I'm willing to die, but I need bodyguards around me 24/7 just in case, and I can't speak in public because I'm worried.
Mm-hmm.
That would have never worked.
I was listening to this podcast yesterday by Quintus Curtius about the difference between recklessness and courage. So I think he thought that, like, I think that Robert Spencer would think that going to this debate would be reckless.
Reckless in
rather
what?
than being courage. Reckless, like
he has no evidence.
He's putting his life on the line for no reason whatsoever.
There's no evidence that he was even putting his life on the line to begin with. He's just appealing to the prejudice of his community. It's very easy. This is a very easy way of getting out of debate for a lot of explicit Islamophobes. Oh yeah, I'm willing to debate with you, but you might be a terrorist. Can't.
Yeah.
It helps them to continue promoting this narrative that we're all dangerous, while at the same time, on the other side of their mouth, they're denying the fact that they hate all Muslims or they think all Muslims are dangerous people. So you might be a terrorist, so I can't risk my life But yes, I am willing to speak, but I can't speak to you. You see?
Mm-hmm.
So then they don't ever have to debate anyone.
Right.
Because they can always just keep appealing to that prejudice of the society. Oh, he's right. Yeah, those Muslims might be dangerous. So Asadullah Al Andalusi, my cousin, had a very similar situation happen. He was about to debate an atheist. They had this plan for weeks. Okay? He gets to the venue. Guy calls out, says, "I'm worried about security."
Of course.
Back to the debate. Okay? All his followers were like, "Yeah, we understand. You might have been killed by those evil Muslims in the audience who wanted to blow you up because you're preaching out against their ideas." See, it helps to further that stereotype, that negative stereotype, while at the same time giving off this veneer that you're still being intellectually honest and you're willing to have discussion with people. Right? Saves your skin, while at the same time it helps you to continue demonizing the people that you're attacking.
Yeah, it's just excuses. And no, it's like even these a lot of the non-Muslim so-called free thinkers and classical liberals, they'll never invite a traditional Muslim on their show, right?
Oh, no.
Like you see Dave Rubin or Joe Rogan, right? He's always like, "Oh, I'm open-minded, this and that." Who does he invite about Islam? Like, imagine
didn't he bring Firas Zahabi?
Okay, that's one example of a practicing Muslim, but that's not what they talked about. That was not the main topic.
But Dave, right? Okay, so Dave Rubin, I actually messaged him. I gave him an email. I said, because he's had people on his show, ex-Muslims.
Imam Tawhidi does not count as.
He had Imam Tawhidi on there, who does.
Yeah, he had freaking Murtad Kafir on there.
Yeah, he's had all these ex-Muslims on there, and I came on there and I said, "Hey, I'm studying this and this, and I'd love to have a discussion with you. Why don't you?" Never got back to me. He's never had one, and he never will. You'll never see these people go on there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's all about that follower count, isn't it?
Well, no, it's not even about follower count because
to be recognized by these guys, right?
No, there's many examples of bigger Muslims. Let's use an example. Let's use Hamza Yusuf, right? Why don't they talk to him?
No, Yasser Qadhi.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about follower count. They're liars, right? They're not open to discussion. They're only they only talk to people that agree with them.
If you think about it, even though there's lack of integrity there, it's a good strategy because you see what they're doing is actually they're saturating their own market with a particular viewpoint. If they bring in a counter one and they actually show balance, it'll undermine what they're trying to do. See, their whole purpose, whether they want to admit it or not, is to show that there isn't an intellectual response from our side.
Yes, exactly.
Is that we're barbarians, that we're stupid, underdeveloped people who can't give any sort of response. That the only thing that we will do is try to kill you if you disagree with us. But if we came on a show, say you bring an intellectual Muslim who studied, right, onto their show and debating with them, then it destroys that narrative because it shows that, yes, we do want to have discussion. Yes, we can have discussion. Yes, we are intelligent. And that's not what their followers want to see. And that's not the narrative they want to promote. So even just going, say they invited me, and I'm not saying I'm the best. I'm saying Yasser Qadhi and others are better. But let's say they invited me or somebody else. And I go on there. Without me even having to say anything, I've already won the discussion. Because I've destroyed the narrative that they're trying to promote.
Yeah.
They don't want that. That's bad marketing for them.
Right, yeah. They don't want a guy that went to Malaysia, studied the religion, academic.
No, they don't want a guy in general there. Because as soon as you bring on a guy, as Asadullah said, you ruin the narrative. And the narrative is that all these Muslims, they don't want to talk. But as soon as you bring one on, that just proves that, they do want to talk.
Yeah, and they can't have that because all the ex-Muslims they bring on there are like, yeah, we're so in danger, because we can't have these discussions like we're having right now. This is civilization. We're having really good intellectual discourse, but you can never have this with a Muslim person. That's what they always say. Do you hear that? Every time they have those things, that's exactly. So if they brought somebody on, it would completely undermine everything.
100%. This just shows you their intentions are not trying to find the truth or explore different viewpoints or build bridges. They don't want to do that.
Of course not.
Right?
This is why we have to attack them from the outside, by trying to critique them from the outside, and they don't try to give us any publicity. Or if they do give us publicity, what they'll do is they'll try to quote mine us and try to make us look like to be terrorists or radicals or something, right? Mm-hmm. Look what they did to Daniel.
Yeah. Wait, what did they do to Daniel?
So when they had him on, when Armin Nababi
the debate with
interviewing
bro, that wasn't a debate. Oh my god.
With Imam Tawhidi,
just
whatever it is, right? the whole point of that, or even when the secular jihadists, like when they had me on or when they had Daniel on, they were trying to throw us into a corner. And one of the reasons they'll never invite me back to their show is because I refuse to be put in that corner. You know, I don't know if you noticed this discussion, but if you saw that discussion, what they were trying to do is like, I came prepared. Okay, so the whole topic was about, is terrorism, you know, is Islamic terrorism actually Islamic? That was a whole discussion. And I brought on like studies. I had like papers and books next to me. I had like a whole list of references ready to go, you know, with all these psychological.
You're all excited books. And like,
and I was like, let's go, let's go. And in the middle of the discussion, I brought it up. I said, look, I have all these studies if you want to talk about them, all the evidence that goes against your theory. And do you know what happened? I kid you not. They're like, no, let's go on to something else. I'm not joking. That's exactly what was said to me.
Wow. I need to go watch this.
No, if you go watch that, I mean, I might upload it on my channel eventually. I'm still doing some editing because the audio is pretty bad, but they have it on their own channel. That literally happened. The very thing they called me to come on discussing, they changed the subject in the middle of the discussion when I decided to say, oh yeah, I want to bring in this academic evidence. I have all this stuff waiting here. Let's talk about it. Like, no, let's just have a talk. And they switched it to like something like about hellfire or something. I was like, what does this have to do with, you know, the topic?
Yeah, what a pussy move.
you asked me to rant. This is me ranting. I don't even know what we're talking about anymore.
No, that's awesome.
Oh, yeah. You want to go to the we have actually 2 more questions.
Okay.
Can I ask those? So you studied Western philosophy, right, as well as Islamic studies.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, you didn't just study Western philosophy and you hated it all the time. You probably enjoyed some parts of it.
I enjoyed most
you
of it.
found some parts of it useful, right?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the exercise of my brain. Yeah.
Yes. So,
just
what ideas do you think are like the most useful, or which ideas did you enjoy the most?
Pragmatism.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I am. I mean, obviously, you guys know this. So,
but what's a pragmatism? What is it?
We need to explain this to Ammar because Ammar doesn't get it.
Which is the American School of Philosophy. The primary American School of Philosophy is called Pragmatism. It was developed primarily in the Americas. Now, actually, let me correct that because even William James would disagree with that notion. Although the formal school known as Pragmatism was developed in the Americas, primarily North America, pragmatism as a philosophy itself has existed for quite some time. And William James even said that himself, that it's just a name for something old, an old way of thinking. And pragmatism is basically, very simply put, it's believing in things, or believing in ideas and things because they work. And what does that mean by workability? Workability for a pragmatist is basically, how does it cohere with your other experiences and your understanding of the world, and how well does it make sense of everything else? That's basically it. It's not based on any sort of direct validity, like say concordance. Like I have to see something in order to verify that existence of that thing. It has a lot to do more with whether, like, your brain is a puzzle basically, or your way of looking at the world is like a puzzle. Okay, you have bits and pieces of imagery, right? So what a pragmatist will do is say, okay, well, how's the best way? What's the best way of getting a full picture here that makes sense of the data that I have?
Oh wait, continue.
So that's what a pragmatist will do. They'll develop theories on the basis of how well they can organize and make things coherent in their brain, and whether that theory is workable towards doing.
What does workable mean? Like,
workable means being able to make things coherent. It also can pertain to predictions, whether things will come true as a result, or whether a prediction comes true as a result of the theory that you've chosen. It can also mean whether or not it works in the sense that your life is benefited.
Okay.
Like you as a person feel complete, or feel whole, or feel like everything makes sense around you. Like, can it explain things? Can the theories that you've chosen, the beliefs that you've chosen, explain your experiences in a good way? without any contradictions, without any opposition or significant opposition. If your theory doesn't work, it means that what it means is like, if a theory is weak, say another theory comes along that explains things better, that means that works better than the one that you've adopted. That's what pragmatism is. It's not about whether you can empirically verify or whether you can necessarily logically, everything has to be logically verified or something, right? It's all about, it's actually can incorporate both empiricism and rationalism within its sphere.
Can you give some examples of?
Yeah. I just want to ask before, like, the examples. Like, I guess this would be an example. Like, say you're a Christian and you're a pragmatist, and say you're a Muslim and a pragmatist. How does that person operate on their beliefs, and how would the Muslim convince the Christian to become Muslim in light of pragmatism?
This is how pragmatists resolve the issue of differing beliefs. Say a Christian meets the Muslim, and they're both pragmatists. Okay, and they both have their own paradigms, right? Now, the Muslim will bring up something about his beliefs, and the Christian will bring up something he believes. Now, there's the contention. Then they both believe in one God, so that's fine. But then they get to the whole Trinity thing, and now everything's crap. Okay, so like, wait a minute, something's wrong here. So now they both experience an anomaly. The Christian has experienced an anomaly in that the Muslim believes that God is not three people. Just one thing. And then the Muslim has experienced an anomaly because the Christian is saying, well, there are three persons in one, and Jesus is God, etc., etc. Now, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to look through their beliefs, their paradigms, individual paradigms, and determine whether or not those particular anomalies can fit within the paradigm. Now, they both probably come to the conclusion that no, that's not the case. So if something is wrong, either I'm wrong, the Muslim, either one person's wrong, or the person they're speaking to is wrong.
Right.
So now, how do we determine which is right? That's when we start looking at the coherence of both paradigms and whether or not the experiences of each individual, both in religious experience, both in scriptural experience, etc., conforms better to their theories. So that's very vague. So let me give you an example. So let's look at internal coherency. The Muslim challenges the Christian and says, okay, so you say God is one, but three persons, right? How does that work? And the Christian explains it. But for the Muslim, his view is actually more simple. It's like, well, we don't have three people, we have one person, or there's one being, right? So that's a much more simple explanation. Why is your more complex explanation preferable to mine? Yeah, that would be the first question that should be asked by the Muslim. Why is that preferable? Now, whether the Christian can rationalize it or not will determine how much they've thought about their beliefs. But that's actually a very important question. Why is it preferable? And that's something that many people don't ask when they have disagreements. Why is your theory preferable to my theory? Now, the pragmatist would say, one, mine's more simple. Two, yours is more confusing. That's a problem for a pragmatist.
But how is this, not to trouble, but how is this different than something logical? Because the 3-in-1 thing, just logically, it doesn't make sense.
You can kind of, if you use like Aristotelian metaphysics, or actually Neoplatonism, you can actually rationalize the 3-in-1.
You got to define these things as you go along.
So substance and essence. So so the accidents and the essence. So they consider the persons to be accidents or attributes, not attributes, but like basically the essence is one thing. So there's one God in essence, but he's three persons in that essence.
Yeah, they'll have some sort of rationalization.
We'll rationalize it that way. So for a pragmatist, first thing would be like, okay, which of these is more simple and which one is too convoluted? That's one criteria. Now, it doesn't always pass, right? So sometimes things can be very complex. So what's the next step? Okay, well, as a pragmatist, it should be internally consistent with my other beliefs. So one thing Christianity has a problem with is so first off, Christians believe that God is immutable, perfect. And perfection includes the idea that one cannot lose something, one cannot become decreased. You know, that thing is as it is and always will be. Cannot change. It's like, without, for example, God, like, you can't give up anything, you can't do anything, right? The other problem, though, Christianity has is also something else essential to its doctrine, which is the concept that God sacrificed something. Now, sacrifice implies a loss.
Right.
You have to give something up of yourself.
Right.
But God can't lose anything.
Because then if he was able to lose anything, he would not be God.
Yeah. So according to their own definition. So there's an internal inconsistency there. Now, Christians can respond and say, well, he didn't really give up something because he didn't really sacrifice. That's just a word he used for us. It's like, well, if he didn't really sacrifice something, then what was the significance of the sacrifice?
Right.
You see what sort of words a pragmatist would ask. It gets to the
what is the significance of the sacrifice?
It's not. Is it logically necessary, or can it be empirically verified? No, I'm asking, what's the consequence of your ideas? Is it consistent with your other beliefs? What's the significance compared to my belief? Is that preferable? That's what a pragmatist would ask, and that's actually for a pragmatist. That's the most important qualities of a belief. Are its consequences, are its benefits, are whether or not it's coherent with your other viewpoints, is whether or not it's a better explanation, is whether or not it's more simple or too complex.
Okay, so the more simple part, the simple part, is that an inherent trait of all pragmatists, regardless of theology?
That would be one sort. I guess you could call one axiom. Yeah, is whether or not it's not necessarily that the more simple theology is the better one. Is this whether or not the more simple the more simple explanation can explain the thing still. See, because you can have two theological positions and one's more complex than the other, but if they don't explain the same things, then it's pointless to compare their complexity or their simplicity to each other. But if we have the concept of like one God, and one theology has a better or more simple understanding of that explains it in just the same way, but without all of the convoluted nonsense that's unnecessary, then it's more preferable explanation. It shows that the theory is more efficient. So, for example, Occam's razor is a pragmatist principle,
which is basically the more simpler explanation is the more logical one, or is the correct one, or the one we go with.
Right. We don't say correct. We say this more.
Yeah, we don't. It's more useful.
Right. Okay. So, like in this case, as a pragmatist, if I was a Muslim, I'd say, well, our theology is the most simple one.
Yeah, it explains everything that you just said, but without all the added crap. Next, it would be, and our theology is consistent with our other beliefs, whereas yours causes a lot of problems.
Right, like the dying for the sins, but
not even just that sacrifice, but also dying. Like, okay, so what happened? So if Jesus died, he's the third person of the Trinity, then you're telling me God changed because then it dropped down to 2 people in 3 days.
Oh, yeah.
No, but wait a minute. No. He didn't really die. Just his body died. Okay, well, then how did he die? His human body died. Okay, well, for God, that's nothing. Like, what did he give up? Like, he gave up a shell of himself. That's not a big deal. Like, do you think God would be affected by that?
What about like in how has pragmatism been used in science?
Oh, no, hold on.
Or you want to continue with this?
No, I wanted him to. I was gonna.
To the pragmatist perspective, like the whole thing, like in the contemporary world, we have issues with gender roles. Very contentious issue. Women and men should be equal in everything that they do and say. Of course, human society has not functioned like that ever.
Yeah. So you'd ask why.
And there are biological differences between men and women that are very obvious. I mean, that's not to say that women and men should abuse each other, obviously not. But there are certain roles that men and women are suited for. And Islamic ethos accounts for that and promotes that very natural position, whereas, other beliefs don't. So, I mean, which one really is more in conformity with the human experience and more natural to the human experience than others? These are things that the pragmatist would ask. It's not necessarily, is it true? Because truth to a pragmatist is not some absolute thing. I know it's
like whatever I want. It's like, have you ever seen like the Avengers, like the newest one?
Yeah, I've seen them all.
There's this one meme in it that says like truth is whatever I want it to be. Thanos says that.
That's not really.
Is that what because some people would have that kind of misconception about pragmatism, is that like, oh, if it's more useful, or if it's something that
that's even nihilist. Like, that's a nihilist position, because nihilists would say there's no objective meaning, there's no absolute meaning or purpose to the universe. We make our own meaning and purpose. But
isn't that kind of what a pragmatist would?
No, that's not what a pragmatist would say. Basically, whatever works the best is closest to the truth that you can get. The pragmatist would also say that you don't know 100% of everything, so you can't have absolute knowledge of the subject matter. So what is true to a pragmatist is what is the best working model. But at the same time, they wouldn't say, a pragmatist would not say that is absolutely the case. Like, there's always room for error. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, in terms of methodology, not in terms of belief. Because, when you actually believe something,
you can't doubt.
You can't. Well, yeah, you can't. Well, you don't. It's kind of actually unnatural to do so.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you. Can I give a really good example of like why you should be a pragmatist? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So say you can't prove that you're not in the matrix, right?
Yeah, I think it's another example I gave you.
Was this the example you gave me?
Asadullah, tell it.
Okay, then you can tell it then.
So you can't prove that you're in the matrix. Yeah, it's true. You can't prove that you're in some computer simulation. If somebody come up to you and said, "Yeah, bro, we're in the matrix," right? Well,
but you can't prove that you're not in it. You too.
First off, what is the default here? The way that we come to doubt things is based on whether or not we've experienced an anomaly in our daily and basic experiences. So if I walk outside, and I use this example a lot. If I walk outside right now and I look outside and I see my tree, I have a bunch of trees outside. So if I look at my apple tree, my front yard, okay, I don't go out every morning and go, "Is that really an apple tree?" I assume that's an apple tree because that's what I've seen, and I'm just going to continue assuming it's an apple tree until something changes in my experience that makes me doubt that. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, according to the skeptic or somebody who constantly requires empirical or rational validity for everything, they're going to go, well, to be consistent, they have to, every time they experience an object, they have to actually utilize their methodology in order to verify that that thing actually is the case. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, a pragmatist says that's nonsense. I'm not going to do that because I need to live. Like, I can't walk out every day and doubt whether or not I'm in reality because I wouldn't be able to function. I have to take a lot of things for granted in order for me to even have knowledge of the world. Right? I have to believe that I'm in reality, that what I'm experiencing is actually there in order for me to even move forward. If I'm constantly doubting everything and I have to require justification for everything that I see or immediately, in my immediate purview, then I'll never get anywhere. I won't be able to take the first step. So pragmatist says, to hell with all of that. Basically take things for granted as long as they work. And until they don't work, then you have an issue to resolve.
Okay.
What was pragmatism in response of?
No, wait, as long as they work, right? Like, what is it like? As long as they work with your reality and perception of life.
Like, for example, if you're a Christian, right, and you've never experienced another religion in your life, there's no reason for you to go, "Oh, is my Christianity, is there something wrong with it?" You don't know there's an alternative. You've never experienced an alternative.
Right.
Until you experience that alternative and until you experience an anomaly in your faith, then you start thinking about which one works the most in understanding my world. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, the most coherent explanation that you have is the one that you should adopt because that's the only one you can adopt. You see what I'm saying? The pragmatist breaks everything down in a simple way like that. Like, basically, you adopt what you can and what you should based on the resources, the intellectual resources, or the amount of data that you have at your disposal.
So whatever makes sense to my little brain, I should consider that to be true for all intents and purposes.
Think about it, though. Is there any other way to go about it?
No.
I mean, if you really think about it, you really don't have a choice in that matter. Whatever you've experienced or what your mind is already used to understanding about things is really all you have. That's the only tool set. You can't import tools that you've never seen or don't have any knowledge of. Right. And even in the event that you have other tools around you, just like we live in the information age, so we can look online and see a lot of things. go to the library, etc. You have to look at those tools and compare them. You see which of these is more reliable for me. And there's a comparison and contrast that occurs between those things and those events. But this idea that everything you come across, every experience you have to doubt or you have to validate based on some other methodology. To a pragmatist, that makes you a dysfunctional human being, and that's not actually how people act or behave at all.
No, it's not. Yeah, there's so many things you can't empirically prove that you accept.
It's not even rationally. It's like, look, dude, if I'm walking outside and things are working, as long as I'm not like hallucinating, I'm not seeing like pink elephants flying across the sky, things are okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, Like the structures that we live in, even the cultural structures, the religious structures, government structures that we live in, if we don't have any knowledge of anything else that works better than that, you really don't have any justification for doubting it or even going against it. And even in the event that something does come and challenges that, if that thing is not good enough at explaining that information or that data or that experience or those experiences, then you have no reason to leave your other faith. What ex-Muslims, a lot of people do is that they see an alternative and they just jump over immediately without even questioning whether or not the other one is sustainable or adequately actually addresses their concerns. One of the things that you see a lot of especially when a lot of Muslims fall to atheism, they have a terrible time explaining morality. They love to complain about so many things. But then if you actually explain moral principles, they're like, well, it's all subjective. It's like, well, what the hell are you talking about? Like, why do you?
Yeah, they claim there's no objective standard for morality, but then they moralize anyways.
Yeah, they act like there is.
Yeah.
But the other thing a pragmatist does, and I didn't mention, is that pragmatists are very much about actions. Your beliefs and your actions should correspond with each other.
Should, yeah.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a non-believer if you don't act a certain way, but if you act consistently opposed to what you actually say, then then you don't actually believe that thing. So whenever I come across people who constantly moralize and constantly bash Islamic ethics, yet at the same time claim that there's no real meaning, purpose, or behind anything that they're talking about, then what comes to my mind is that you don't actually believe that. That makes no sense for you to complain like that.
Why does the pragmatist value that?
Value what? Action?
Value consistency between thoughts and actions. Like why is this significant?
Because for something to work, it has to manifest itself in some way. So workability in terms of coherence means just consistency. That means that it doesn't contradict your other beliefs and that it easily organizes data and information. Workability also applies to the physical manifestations. A moral claim requires a moral action by necessity. So, for example, one of the reasons that I was bashing Robert Spencer earlier is because he doesn't act in accordance with his principles.
He's not congruent with his principles.
No, he's very much a coward, and he doesn't actually believe in the things he claims. He's posturing.
I still don't see why it's important to a pragmatist.
Like as a Muslim, if you commit a sin, aren't you contradicting like your principles?
Okay, so let me put it this way: if you claim to me, here's what a pragmatist says, and I think this is very easy to understand. If you say that prayer is required for you to be a Muslim,
yes,
and you refuse to pray,
okay.
So why is that important to a pragmatist?
It shows an inconsistency between one's actions and beliefs.
Right, refusing to pray is different from forgetting.
Yeah.
Okay. Or yeah.
So then a pragmatist will say you don't actually believe that. Well, they have a justification because then it shows that your theory is not working. It's not making you do anything that you claim that you need to do.
So why should a Muslim be a pragmatist? Or why should they not be?
Well,
why should a person be a pragmatist? Let's put it that way.
In general?
Yeah, in general. Because
what's the alternative, right?
Because pragmatism, and one of the, excuse me, I'm going to get up real quick here. For pragmatists, one of the beauties of pragmatism is what we call a meta methodology or meta theory in many respects, because it actually it can incorporate so many different methods under one umbrella. A pragmatist can also be an empiricist and a rationalist. Basically, a pragmatist can be an empiricist and a rationalist at the same time. They can be everything. at the same time, because what they're looking for is not necessarily
whether you can see it or whether it
no,
makes
they're not
sense to
looking
the
for the
brain.
moral
But
perception. What they're looking for is what works towards achieving a particular goal of coherency and organization. So at any given time, that's why some people are confused about what I believe in sometimes, because sometimes I'll adopt empirical methodologies for, say, scientific claims, but other claims I'll adopt only purely logical, rational methods. They go, how can you do that? And I go, because I'm a pragmatist.
I choose whatever the heck I want.
It works.
Or whatever whatever works, whatever is the most coherent.
Whatever helps to, and they say, well, doesn't that contradict? No, it doesn't actually, because I just demarcate between which method is necessary for when and for what.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. You know, like what's it called, dark matter.
Yeah.
Or you want to continue?
So I was going to say, like, it's the same with having a toolkit. Yeah. I'm not going to use a hammer for everything.
Right.
So, I was going to say, like, dark matter.
Yeah.
So there's no empirical verification for dark matter. Like no one's seen it, no one's experienced it, no one's measured it. But the only reason why we think it exists out there is because the physics tells us so. Like our mind is predicting that, our mind, our math, our physics is predicting that dark matter is eventually going to exist, or like it's going to, like we're gonna experience it at one point.
Okay, so our mind, from the pragmatist perspective, our mind predicts it or experiences it through the knowledge of physics. Is that right?
So it doesn't experience it, but like saying that dark matter does exist is the most pragmatic explanation for what we have. Does that make sense?
So, do you mind if I just explain something that?
Yeah, let's have Asadullah. He's explain it. He's the expert. So, sorry, Fahad.
Okay, so William James is in lecture 3 of his book. He's trying to explain pragmatism and its worth in terms of like theology, and this is just one quote among many. So it's just a few paragraphs. It won't be too long though. So he's talking about free will at first, and it's really interesting. He says, "Free will thus has no meaning unless it be a doctrine of relief. As such, it takes its place with other religious doctrines. Between them, they build up the old waste and repair the former desolations. Our spirit, shut within this courtyard of sense experience, is always saying to the intellect upon the tower, 'Watchman, tell us of the night, if it is aught of promise bear.' And the intellect gives it then these terms of promise. Other than this practical significance, the words God, free will, design, etc. have zero significance outside of their practicality or the human experience." He says, "Yet dark though they be in themselves," meaning though their definitions have no meaning by themselves or intellectually taken, when we bear them into life's thicket with us, the darkness there grows light upon us. If you stop in dealing with such words with their definition alone, thinking that to be an intellectual finality, where are you?" He goes on to say, "It means less than nothing in its pompous robe of adjectives. Pragmatism alone can read a positive meaning into these words, and for that she turns her back upon the intellectualist point of view altogether. God's in his heaven, all's right with the world. That's the real heart of your theology, and for that you need no rationalist definitions." He goes on to say, "Why shouldn't all of us, rationalists as well as pragmatists, confess this? Pragmatism, so far from keeping her eyes bent on the immediate practical foreground, as she is accused of doing, dwells just as much upon the world's remotest perspectives." And then finally he says, "The real vital question for us all is this: what is this world going to be? What is life eventually to make of itself? The center of gravity of philosophy must therefore alter its place. The earth of things long thrown into shadow by the glories of the upper ether must resume its rights," etc. He goes into very poetic prose here. But essentially what he's trying to say is, like, you talk about all these abstractions, right? We talk about what God is, what free will is, all these things, right? But unless it has any relevance to my actual lived experience, it doesn't matter. It means nothing.
Right. Yep.
So when we talk about God, for example, in Islam, do we just talk about God in his attributes? What I mean is the abstract sense, or do we talk about his attributes and how they're relevant to us?
How they're relevant to us, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Right, because you can't talk about them any other way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Ar-Rahman.
Basically saying you can't be a pure empiricist or a pure rationalist.
Oh, okay, I kind of get it. Most people unknowingly already behave as pragmatists.
Yes, that's why
right?
he considers it the natural way of thinking.
Yeah,
we always think about what works for us in our minds and in our lives. We don't think about what's right or what's true in the abstract, objective sense that it's removed from ourselves. We never do.
Is this basically the philosophy of like our uncles, like our community's uncles?
Well, Ibn Taymiyyah was a very well-known pragmatist.
How so?
One of the reasons that he backed the idea that God exists is because human beings are naturally inclined to it, and that to do otherwise would be to make them confused.
Yeah,
that was basically his whole rationale behind the fitrah.
Yeah, the fitrah tells you.
Well, he didn't say the fitrah tells you therefore it's right. He said he made a consequentialist argument. He said to deny the fitrah is to put man in confusion, and to put man in confusion is to lose sight of himself in the world.
Yeah,
that was his justification. Like that was literally the reason why he believed in God.
Okay.
Yeah, wow.
It's like because if you don't, then what else are you going to see? How else are you going to behave as a person? Like there is no other way for people to be.
Yeah.
Same thing with morality. He said, "Why do I believe in transcendent morality through my fitrah? Because to do otherwise would be to throw the world into chaos, to throw man into chaos, to destroy what it means to be human." That was basically his reasoning.
Right, you just become
our Desi, like man, our Desi ancestors, Ammar, you and I, and then you
yours,
and your Spanish
yours.
ancestors.
My ancestors ain't Desi. Get out of here.
No, so
wow, Afghan.
What a pragmatist is trying to say essentially is that yes, this is the natural way of thinking, and all we're trying to say is that you do not choose on the basis of abstractions or on the basis of even whether or not something looks convincing. What you choose is based on how does it affect you in the way you perceive the world, and that is a pragmatic concern.
Wow.
That is not truth for the sake of it. There's no such thing as a pragmatist doesn't say you believe something for the sake of it. That makes no sense to a pragmatist. That's meaningless. You don't love truth for the sake of it. You don't love knowledge for the sake of it. No, you love it because it affects you. Does that make?
It makes sense. Yeah.
No, I can see not. Even if someone is saying I believe in this because for the sake of it, and in reality, it's actually because it affects them in a certain way.
Well, it's
is that right?
It makes them. Well, if you want to go deep into it, it's because it makes their experiences feel coherent and organized. It makes them. It helps them to make sense of the world. It helps them to function in the world.
So 2 + 2 is 4, not because necessarily it's true, but because it's useful.
Exactly. Well, mathematics is a language anyway.
Yeah.
The same way we use any other language.
I'm going to repeat that. 2 + 2 is 4, not because it's necessarily true per se or in of itself, but because it's useful in my daily life. We consider it to be true because it's useful.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a whole like paradigm shift.
It has its own internal consistency, yes, within its own hermeneutic. But the problem, it doesn't have anything objectively beyond itself. Like there's nothing.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
Because you have to understand, math is just symbols.
Sure.
Math is a symbolic structure it's a language that was created to understand the world, and we're trying to see if it corresponds. It has corresponded with, which showcases that the human mind is actually tied to the universe.
Yeah.
Which is, if you want to really confuse an atheist, you want to make
you gotta ask them, like, why does
your brain of this little animal that evolved from the ancestor of the cousin of an ape, right, living on this little blue ball in the middle of nowhere in this massive galaxy, how is it that we can understand a black hole?
Yeah.
What's going on there?
Wasn't there this one essay called like the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in the natural sciences?
Doesn't that make sense though? We live in this. The same thing for the concept of God. Is the same thing that I use for the argument for God's existence or the rationality of belief in God. How is it that we live in such a small planet with such small minds, and yet we are conceiving of something that is not immediately apparent to us? At least the world. Look, okay, and this makes a lot of sense.
The world didn't have to have patterns, and
well, yeah, not even
like,
that,
we didn't have to be made to understand it.
Yeah, but not even that. But think about it. It's like, why would this small little planet, if we're all just atoms, and this is all just a natural coincidence, and there is no intelligence behind everything, right? Whatever. Why is it that the world, or in our minds, have this conception of intelligence beyond our natural plane of existence, right? There's nothing here that's pointing that out to us, unless it's already inbuilt or there's actually some sort of reality behind that. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's nothing here that's telling me God. Now, of course, Muslims believe in signs, but that coincides with our fitrah, because we also believe that we're created. We see design because we were created to see design, right? But for a naturalist, it's like, where do you get the idea? Why are we coming up with this idea in our minds? The whole thing with I brought up the whole thing about the fish in the fish tank, right? I know everyone hates that example for some reason because they don't own fish. But, for me, it's like a fish doesn't understand anything beyond its borders in the fish tank. It's like, it's not going to be like contemplating with its small little brain, whether or not there's a bigger fish tank out there, or like there's something beyond its own immediate existence. It only knows what's in those borders, right? That's its world. That's everything it's supposed to know or can know about itself and about its reality. But humans, for some strange reason, despite being confined on this little teeny planet in the middle of nowhere, can understand things that are light years beyond us. What the hell is going on? That shouldn't be possible. It is. But why? And the answer is not, I don't know, therefore God. The answer is God, because there is no other possibility. Do you see what I'm trying to say? That's the most coherent explanation.
Right.
That there is an intelligence that has given us intelligence, and that wants us to know these things.
Right. There's nothing else that would make sense.
Saying, oh, it's just big cosmic accident and we just happen to be intelligent more than the actual universe itself. There's no intelligence out there. It's only on this little teeny blue planet in the middle of nowhere. Talk about egotistical. I love it when atheists call us egotistical because we believe that God thinks we're special. It's like, you think you're even more special than that because you think we're the only intelligent things in this whole damn universe. Like, we live on this little blue planet in the middle of nowhere. And you think that we're the only smart ones, and that the universe was just randomly, or not even randomly, but just naturally organized without any intelligence whatsoever. That we're more intelligent than whatever made this thing. Really? Talk about ego.
I'm happy that I'm a human. Otherwise, I could have been born a fish.
Well, but think about how much ego that takes, that you think that your intelligence is superior to whatever made this universe. And you have the audacity to claim that theists are arrogant. We're not saying we're more intelligent than the universe or whatever made this universe. We're saying that there is something more intelligent than us and that we're limited in our conception of reality. Atheists are the ones going around going, you're stupid because you believe that there's something that's smarter than you out there. Like, seriously? So I don't know if that was profound to you. For me, that's significant.
No, that was very profound.
No, that was pretty deep. Yeah. For me, what was profound is that, when you pointed out the pragmatist, and you pointed out basically people are pragmatists just naturally.
We are. We just don't have words. I mean, the pragmatists are just trying to put words to the natural human understanding of themselves and the reality around them.
Because, like you said, no one empirically proves every single thing that they believe.
We're stupid.
Even the atheists, they claim that I only follow empirical proof. They don't.
They don't, because they wouldn't be able to function. They wouldn't be online every day debating with theists if they believe that.
Yeah.
They'd be so skeptical they'd probably drive themselves to insanity.
Right. Yeah. There's too many things that you can't empirically prove that you already accept.
No. And you look at even the things that, we'll talk about morals again. You can't empirically prove human rights.
No, you can't. Yeah, you can't empirically prove human rights.
And why
you try to argue Darwinian evolution, but even then you can't. That's not really we've evolved to cooperate. Even that is like a stretch.
Our whole morals, all our values, our political structure, economic structures, everything that we basically value as human beings, and I mentioned this a lot in many lectures, 90% of the things you believe in as a person that makes you a human being, about beliefs even about yourself, about your family, about other people around you, about society, there's nothing scientific or empirical about it at all. And yet the world works, and yet you as a person work. You function in the world that you were given. But atheists never question. They never, if they. That's why I don't believe. And it sounds, they hate when you say this. I don't believe atheists are really atheists because they don't act like that. They act like theists who just happen to remove one part of the equation while keeping all of God's attributes.
Wait, how so?
They remove God while keeping his attributes in the world.
Yeah, I know, but like, how are atheists? How are all closet atheists just atheists?
Because they still believe in.
How are closet atheists theists?
Even though they claim that they don't believe in transcendent values, they act as though those things exist.
Yeah.
They cannot do otherwise. You can't believe in human rights and be like, yeah, I don't really believe this is true. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. You can't just be like, yeah, I believe these are just arbitrary constructs that we've designed in order to,
Yeah, but most atheists do understand that they're arbitrary concepts.
They say that, but they don't behave like that. They behave like their life is on the line if they don't support these things. Like, society will not function, will not operate unless these things are there.
Mm-hmm.
Human beings will all die out or be destroyed. Humanity itself will fall to pieces if they don't support human rights. They will risk their lives, and they will demean other people on the basis that they don't follow those things.
Right, you're acting like a theist.
Basically.
Yeah.
They make takfir of everyone who disagrees with them.
Yeah, exactly. We're basically kuffar to them.
Yeah, and that's the thing, that you don't act like that if you think something is arbitrary.
No, yeah, you don't. And a legit atheist would be like, if you were theoretically, you'd be like, oh, here's like a murderer, and then here's like an engineer.
At the very least, they could say, well, I feel that way because I'm just naturally inclined to do so, but I know for a fact that it's not really what I should be feeling. And then they'll analyze that and they'll deconstruct it, but they don't act like, they just don't. They act like everyone else, how you're supposed to behave, while posturing that they don't believe in something when they actually behave like they do.
But then you can flip that around and put that on Muslims as well. That like, oh, Muslims are supposed to behave as like, if they really were Muslims, they were supposed to behave as though they're about to die at any second, right? They should be praying all the time, but yet they forget about death, right?
No, our beliefs don't say that. Our beliefs are just as much rooted in the world as they are in the hereafter. I mean, much of our theology is centered around doing good things in this world in order to get to the hereafter. I mean, being in
but then why don't people act like that though? Even Muslims, they spend most of their time in free time, or they spend.
I don't want to use the formal term munafiqeen because that has a more
sinister
connotation.
Yeah.
But they are hypocrites in the loose sense, and there are many Muslims out there, and there are many religious people in general out there that act hypocritical in terms of what they believe and how they behave, right? What they claim to believe and how they behave, and that is normal. That is normal for a lot of people. And that is a problem with that individual. And then what they're experiencing is, in many ways, it showcases that they don't believe in just one thing.
Yeah.
They believe in multiple theories or have a mix of paradigm, right? Their paradigm is sort of a hybrid. Because hypocrisy is not simply like, hypocrisy is not simply saying a thing and doing another thing. It's thinking that you believe something, but in actuality, you're trying to convince yourself that you believe in something, but in actuality, you don't. It's kind of like denial, self-denial. There are a lot of Muslims who try to rationalize themselves as being Muslim while doing things completely contrary to the faith by trying to basically make the halal, the haram, the halal. You have Muslims out there who actually claim that drinking is halal, or that eating pork is halal, or eating non-halal food is halal. Or saying it's not a big deal. Don't judge me.
Right.
Because, it's between God and me. Well, if you really believed it was between you and God, you wouldn't do it because he's much worse judged than anybody else.
If you believe in God, you wouldn't do it. But couldn't those?
No, if you say I'm struggling, then in many ways you can say that they're holding on to that faith.
Like what I'm confused at is because couldn't you say someone that's sinning, they're just low iman, they don't just necessarily disbelieve.
No, I'm not saying they disbelieve. I'm saying that hypocrisy, even in our religion, one can have elements of hypocrisy without being a disbeliever.
Oh, that's what you mean. Okay.
One can fluctuate between certain things. There are levels of hypocrisy. And a pragmatist would say, yes, you need to fix that.
Yeah. Okay.
But there's a point where it's like I said, there are more apparent forms where it's like, okay, you claim you need to pray to be a Muslim. You claim to be a Muslim, but then you say you don't have to pray. You yourself. Like, that's a contradiction.
Right.
Or it showcases that you don't really believe as you say. You're not who you are.
Right. That's different from like trying to pray and falling short.
Yeah, falling short is like you're struggling with yourself. You're experiencing anomalies that you have yet to, as pragmatists would say, you have yet to work out your issues.
Okay.
Like you're struggling. There's a battle going on, right, between two alternative paradigms. Your desires would function as another form of paradigm.
Yeah, your nafs, your desires would be what
you're fighting between the two. But you're still holding on to your paradigm. You're still it's like there's a battle going on. Whereas another person just simply claims with on one hand, and then they act completely different way. That's not a pragmatist to say you don't actually believe that thing.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So like what I mentioned about atheists, like they most of them say that morals don't have any real objective value or meaning or purpose, and yet they believe complete contrary to this. They act contrary to this statement, these statements that they claim. Like that makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
Or they think like, oh, I don't.
Did you read the last question?
Sorry, I don't believe anything without empirical evidence. Yes, you do. What are you talking about? Like I said, 90% of the things you believe in don't have empirical evidence. That's nonsense.
Because you act as though those things that don't have empirical evidence are true. Therefore,
they're real things. Yeah, that's the thing. Like morals, you act like those things are greater realities, are just as greater realities as your own car and your house and the food you eat. Don't sit here and tell me you don't.
Well, we evolved to be that way as a human species?
Well, even then, that's still but okay. So then you got that pragmatist could fire back and say, if you evolved to be like that, then why don't you believe in conformity to it?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you going against your natural inclinations? You're defying your evolutionary development. Why?
Okay, yeah, that makes
that's why these evolutionaries don't work on pragmatists, because we're just going to fire back and say you see, Alvin Plantinga actually developed, which is funny because he's an analytical philosopher. He doesn't really believe in pragmatism, but he developed a really beautiful argument against evolution, which I don't necessarily agree with because I think it could be turned around a bit. But I think it's really interesting how he kind of flips the script. He says basically like you can't really trust your beliefs to be true because what is evolutionarily fit is not necessarily true.
Right? Oh, damn.
You see what I'm saying? But of course, a pragmatist would respond and say, well, it doesn't matter then because you wouldn't know otherwise.
Right. Yeah.
You'd have to follow that anyway because you don't have any choice.
No choice, yeah.
So, but for what he's arguing against is very effective. For a pragmatist, it's just like, I don't care because I have no other.
Wait, what's evolutionary fit is not necessarily true. What does that mean?
Because like you could develop an evolutionary trait that helps you survive without that thing actually being like you could develop a trait that anytime you hear a certain sound,
right,
like you'll develop a reaction to run away from it, even if there's nothing there to run away from. But it helps you survive, but it doesn't mean that the thing is actually there.
Right.
Or a smell or a certain.
Well, no. Well, like I guess a good example would be like your evolutionary trait for like I don't know what's a good example, like procreation or just your impulse, right? Like why are you denying your impulse of like sleeping with like I don't know 10 women or something? I don't know.
You're denying your impulse. Well, I mean, so the evolutionary trait would be like, okay, so you feel aroused with a certain sex, right?
Yeah.
So I guess you could say, why are you denying? Somebody could say, well, I've heard evolution or atheists say that rape is very natural. To me, that makes no sense.
Why not? From their perspective, that makes sense.
Well, Here,
rape is what?
Perspective, it makes no
rape
sense
is
because
natural.
rape,
from their perspective,
even though that guarantees the most, like the best way to quote unquote procreate, I guess you could say, it doesn't function in a way that would help society raise families, which are something that's essential to human civilization, which is why I think it's nonsense when they say that. But yeah, I mean, even evolutionists themselves, people who believe in evolution, they tend to go to extremes and say things that they don't really comprehend too well. But yeah, so Alvin Plantinga would basically say something like, okay, so everything that evolves doesn't necessarily lead to truth because it doesn't need to. It just needs to lead to survivability, right?
Right.
So pragmatists would just argue, well, that doesn't affect me because whatever leads to survivability is what we would consider true anyway.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Ammar, do you understand that? So like everything that you consider to be true is only true because it really just helps you survive.
Not just
pragmatism is just like, okay.
The world. Survivability is just one part of functioning. Like living is one part of functioning. The other part of functioning is being able to go through the world and understand it, organize your ideas appropriately, experience it well, benefits you in terms of your mental, psychological, physical health, et cetera, et cetera. It's a whole holistic way of being. I mean, human beings don't just live by surviving. Surviving is not just the only thing humans do, right? We also love.
Right. That's not
beauty. We experience war, conflict.
Right. Yeah, like love. Like, why do you you can't prove? Like, is love like proving emotions?
Well, pragmatists wouldn't care. They'd be like, why are you trying to prove something? What is there to prove?
Yeah, but empirically, right? If you were to operate from that paradigm,
yeah, like pragmatists would be like,
is love real? Like, how do you empirically prove that?
Yeah, pragmatists would say, who cares?
Yeah, I'm saying like
I'm a pragmatist.
Well, pragmatists wouldn't say who cares, but you say who cares about your method because I experience love, so
therefore it's real.
Well, just not necessarily say it's real. It's therefore this is the only way I can behave. It's the only way I can act and believe.
Right. Okay.
I can't say with 100% certainty that it is the case
in
terms of because I don't have full knowledge of the subject, but I have to. But I act as though I do because there's no alternative. There's nothing for me else to behave as. Like I love because I am human. I'm human because I love. There's nothing else there. If you tell me love isn't real, then I'm going to tell you that you're a moron who doesn't understand what it means to be human.
Right. And then atheists that say that they're empirical but still believe in love, that's inconsistent.
Well, I need empirical evidence. Oh, it's just all chemicals. Well, I'm sorry. I don't experience chemicals.
Well, even just chemicals. How do you know which chemicals correspond to? Like, you can't really
find the chemicals that correspond. It's like I don't experience chemicals.
Wait, what isn't your experience? Isn't your emotion the chemical?
No,
no, it isn't. My emotion has
Neuroscience.
meaning. Like the reason I sacrifice myself for my wife isn't because of chemical. There's more meaning behind my love, and if I start defining my love as a chemical, you as a human being will not understand what I'm saying.
Right. Like you can't function if you define it as just like an impulse.
Yeah, like oh, it's an impulse. That's why I'm protecting you. No, that's not how people function. It's not how we talk to each other.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I know it's starting to sound mystical, but it's not. It's that those things are left to the side for the details. But the pragmatist basically just says this. Holistically, everything that works in your favor to not only promote your survivability, but promote your survival, but to promote your mental, your physical, your psychological health, and that makes sense of the world around you, that helps you to explain everything, and leaves you with less confusion, and leaves you with more answers than questions. That is the belief that you need to subscribe to. Okay, that's the belief you need to subscribe to, and these can be determined based on inner workability and external workability. So internal workability is the internal coherence of the subject or of the paradigm. So for example, if there are internal inconsistencies with regard to logic or between other beliefs, then of course the paradigm there's something wrong about it. And the external coherence is whether or not it can absorb anomalies or explain anomalies away, or if it's the better explanation out of an alternative that is you're approached with. Does that make sense? Like
it has to be consistent. Its its inner belief system needs to be consistent with basically your coherence of what you experience, and plus of the claims it makes, and then it needs to be able to explain explain anomalies within it without breaking its system.
Now, before we go on to the next question, if you don't mind, I just want to very concisely remove this misconception of pragmatism. People say, well, what it means by works is that anything that gets you what you want within that given time.
Yeah, I was going to ask about this.
No, that's not pragmatism, because pragmatism requires that you be consistent with your own principles. If you have to violate your principles to get something that you want, then you've actually destroyed the pragmatic aspect of your own beliefs. You see, you become a hypocrite, and hypocrisy, it's not pragmatic.
Yeah, you become a hypocrite. Yeah,
so, because hypocrisy is pragmatism is opposed to hypocrisy.
Yeah, 100%. So that makes sense.
That's not pragmatism. And unfortunately, groups like Hizb ut-Tahrir, right? They define pragmatism in this way as hedonism, and that is wrong.
Yeah, that is wrong. Yeah.
So that's not what.
Ammar, can you explain why it's wrong?
Why is pragmatism? Because
why is pragmatism not hedonism?
Pragmatism is not hedonism because your beliefs still need to manifest in your action. So if you're compromising your internal principles that you believe, that breaks your pragmatic principle, because you're contradicting what you're saying you believed originally.
No, but what if I just believe hedonism is just a way to live?
Then that wouldn't be that doesn't invalidate pragmatism, because you just believe in hedonism as a pragmatist.
Yes.
You believe in hedonism as a pragmatist. Okay, so then if you're an actual hedonist,
if you're not
in action, then you're consistent, right?
If you're a hedonist and you're a pragmatist and you practice hedonism, you're consistent. But if I'm a Muslim and I'm a pragmatist and I practice hedonism, then there's like an inconsistency that I need to resolve.
Because it doesn't work.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense, guys. I got it.
Yeah, and then if I was to talk to a hedonist from a pragmatistic perspective, I would actually question what is the simplicity of his belief? Why hedonism? Like, why is that what makes his reality, his universe coherent?
Okay.
What is the significance of that belief? That's what I would ask.
Now, if he's true to himself, you'll find that there are certain values inherent within his actions
that are inconsistent with himself.
Yes.
Because we believe we're right.
Doesn't really think too much about what they're doing.
Yeah. and that's because we believe we're right.
Well, you have to believe you're right. There's nothing wrong being right. This is another thing a lot of atheists come across. They're very arrogant in this way too, and they're kind of stupid in the same way when they say, well, you guys act like you're always right about, well, how else am I supposed to act?
Yeah, me believing in my thing implies that I'm right.
Yeah, you want me to go around going, I don't know what I believe. That's not going to help me.
Yeah.
You know. And they do too. They go and say, no, we're very open-minded. No, you're not, because you're acting like a jerk.
They're not open-minded. If they were open-minded, they would consider each and every single possibility.
Yeah. In other words, you have to be dogmatic about certain things in order for you to even function.
Exactly. Everyone, yeah, exactly. 100%.
You have to have an opinion. You have to think you're right about something. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, you'll make some assumptions on what you believe already.
Yeah. So if you want to get into more detail, read this book.
What's it called?
Pragmatism.
By William James.
By William James. A new name. What's it called? A new name for what?
For some old ways of thinking.
Some old ways of thinking. His first lectures on the subject matter. It'll give you a brief, concise version of what I've just talked about. I hope I've explained it efficiently, but
pragmatism is just another word for fitra.
Fitra is your intuition, but pragmatism is basically like how do you believe and function based on that?
It's like your pragmatism is like the combination of your fitra and your rationale. Something like that. I don't know.
Pragmatism is a pragmatist.
Okay, we'll stick with that. Okay, that was pretty good. Because Fahad tried to explain it to me before. I didn't really get it.
I know it sounds kind of vague, but in reality, it's very simple. If you really think about it in terms of how you actually behave and act, and the whole issues with empiricism and rationalism and all this other stuff that's come up in recent years, in the past few hundred years actually, is really I think it's confusing people more than anything. Because it's making you narrow your perspective when in fact that's not how you actually operate.
Mm-hmm.
You know. there are different modes of existing in interpreting and perceiving things.
Right. It's not only being empirical.
So, from your perspective, do you believe that there is no one objective? Wait.
Okay.
There's no one objective reality?
I think that there are such things as facts, and I think there is such thing as truth. But when you're talking about whether or not one can perceive something other than what they experience and believe, no.
Okay. Well, like there's. Well, you say perceive, you do mean experience as well?
Yeah, because look, you can't jump out of your head.
Right.
Like all you know is what you see and what you experience and what you hear and what you feel and what you think. You know, that's all you know. You don't know what everyone else is. Only by what they tell you and how they behave. You can sort of deduce certain things, but you really only know your own experiences and your own perceptions.
Right. Like my understanding of Fahad is not actually of who Fahad is. It's my perception.
Well, Fahad knows himself more than you do.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know yourself more than he does.
Yeah, but I can't experience knowing him more than he knows himself.
You can't experience what he's experiencing either.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You want to go to the last question?
Yeah, let's go next one. This is pretty crazy.
Are you trying to write a book, Asadullah?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, what's this book going to be about?
It's a lot of things right now. I'm trying to see if I can narrow it down, but basically I'm trying to address the Muslim youth, the Muslim Ummah in general, in terms of our thinking and seeing if I can. It's a very ambitious project in which I'm trying to see if I can reverse certain things and trying to bring Muslims into a different realm of thinking where we can move forward intellectually. And I know that sounds very ambitious and super confident of myself, but it's something that I have to do. And I don't know if I'll succeed or not, but that's something that I'm trying to do right now. And I'm developing a lot of the arguments that I've kind of expressed to you guys and a lot of my own approaches to the subjects of ex-Muslims and apostasy and modern world, liberalism, etc., are all going to be in this one book. I don't know what I've named it. I have some tentative titles, but the methodology.
What are some tentative titles?
I have to look at them now. So let's see. I had one in particular that I really liked, and a lot of other people thought it was a good idea. And
basically, it's the book is going to be about Islamic Futurism, right?
It's not just about atheism. It's about everything I think that we're dealing with right now, and I'm going to try to make it as concise as possible. Of course, you can't. It's so much to talk about at once, and I may write other articles and more detailed books on the subject matter at a later point. But let's see. I think I put the title here. I'm sorry.
Towards a New Andalusia.
No. See, the thing is, my whole thing is I don't want to actually.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to bring in the past. That's the thing. Like, I want to use the past as a form of inspiration, but not as a means of actually getting there, or trying to copy what happened in the past, because I don't think that's possible. And what I mean by that is that we're experiencing things that were not experienced back then. And we're going to be experiencing things that were never experienced in the past. So how can we apply the same structures and ways of thinking from the past to our future? And that's something that, I want to develop a new paradigm which addresses a lot of our concerns and what we need to be doing. And I guess, and I mentioned this to you guys earlier prior to this podcast, basically I want to develop a form of Islamic futurism where I want Muslims to start thinking about, where can we go? Where can we be? Where should we be going? And how can we surpass our rivals? Not how we can be like them, not how we can revive the past and be like our ancestors. No. I don't want Muslims to be like, how do we return to the golden age? I want Muslims to be like, how can we make a new one?
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot to do with that, and it's still very tentative as well. There are a lot of details in my head that I really haven't put to paper yet, and I really need to. But essentially, the whole idea is that I want Muslims to start thinking beyond what we currently have at our disposal here. I want them to start thinking in a way which puts them in the future, which places their children in the future. It's sort of like we complain so much about what's going on right now and what we need to do to fix right now. And I think the actual solutions are not focusing on what's going on right now. I think the solutions are focusing on what is going to happen, right? How we can reach a certain point. We spend so much money trying to put band-aids on things that we're not thinking about developing structures and infrastructure and organizations and methods which can resolve things for the future, which can put us in a place in the future which is not where we are right now, obviously, which is probably the lowest point that we've ever been in our history. And that sounds all very vague because it is. I haven't really organized my thoughts that much on the subject. I do know that I think I'm going in the right direction. But, so for example, let me just give you one that I've thought about quite a bit. The whole issue with the caliphate. Okay, we lost the caliphate. That's fine. I don't care. We can talk about this. Okay, we lost the unity among Muslims, the general political unity among Muslims. It wasn't completely unified in the past, but it was more unified than it is now. We lost the traditional caliphate structure. And as a result of that, we become disunified. Now, for a lot of Muslims, traditional Muslims out there, they keep wanting the caliphate back, right? They want to bring back that old structure. They want to bring back these things and reestablish Islam as this massive empire that, that's ready to take on the world. Okay, that's fine. You want to have that ideal. Here's my idea. How about you put that as your future focus, but let's move in a pragmatic fashion towards that goal and not think about it idealistically. Let's not think about how the past structured things. Let's not think about what's going on right now, how we can develop it, in accordance with our contemporary surrounding. Let's think about getting to one particular goal that can help us get to that goal eventually, right? So a sort of gradualist approach, but one that's more realistic and one that can immediately benefit this ummah for the future, right? And so, for example, I've come up with an idea that instead of going for this traditional caliphate, right, let's think about a new paradigm, and let's look at something that is immediately workable, like an Islamic confederacy, okay, between the contemporary nation states. So we're still taking some things from the present, but what we're doing is we're looking into the future in a way where we can resolve a lot of our issues and focus on things that are more productive, let's say, right? Establishing a caliphate right now isn't going to happen. It's just not going to happen. It's ridiculous to think that way. And there's nothing around in our immediate environment or contemporary sense that is going to help us get there. So Islamic futurists would think, okay, since we're going for the long run plan, let's figure out the best way to that path. Let's not establish it now. Let's figure out what we can do now to get to there. Okay? So, for example, I've thought about an Islamic confederacy between nation states, very similar to the EU, but a little bit different in structure in terms of one that continues, makes that still allows for Muslim majority countries to remain autonomous while simultaneously giving resources to each other, etc., and basically, relieving ourselves of current burdens that we have.
Don't they already have that in like the Islamic organization?
No, it doesn't work. So the OIC doesn't work.
Why?
It just doesn't function because the states aren't really they're not tied to each other in a legal sense in the way that would
more
make
like a spiritual metaphysical kind of way.
Would make it a consequence if they deviated from that plan. So, for example, if you really wanted to have an organization of Islamic cooperation, they would all share the same currency. They would all share the same economic burdens. They would all share the same military powers. Right? Things like this. Okay. Right now, that's not happening. So that's why they're completely autonomous. The OIC is simply an organization that gets together and talks about stuff. There's no legal obligation to each other at all. They can violate their agreements at any point in time without any consequence. Right? There's no contractual. They all say, well, we're all Muslims, so we're all united. No, they're not. They don't care. Okay, if Iraq wanted to go to war with Iran tomorrow, or sorry, with Syria tomorrow, or Syria want to go to war with Saudi Arabia tomorrow, they could do it. Nobody would care. There's no contractual agreement or consequence from either side. Like say if there were member states and they all had this agreement, and if one of them violated it, then all other states would be obligated to go to war with that state. That's not going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no feasible structure right now that is gearing the Muslims towards unification. Likewise, there's no feasible structure, right? There's no structure right now in the Ummah that is allowing us to be scientifically productive.
I mean, you have the university system.
University system is based what? On what?
What do you mean it's based off? It's based off of like
colonial structure,
Western paradigm, right?
Western paradigms, right? Capitalist systems. Why do you think
wasn't that
going overseas? For what reason?
But isn't that the same exact paradigm, or that we had or that Muslims had initially?
What do you mean?
That like they had universities in the past as well, like University of Baghdad, University.
Oh, we did have universities. Of course, we had universities. What I'm trying to say is all of our talent is going overseas, though. Why are they going overseas?
Because it's better and more advanced.
Money.
Well, for one, they're funded.
Money, yeah.
For the jobs, right? How many rich people are in this ummah?
There's a lot, actually.
Quite a bit. Where is all that money going
to? Buying Cheetos and
even the doctors in the
West,
all the Muslim doctors.
That's a good point, because even in America, most of the Muslims are what? Engineers, doctors.
Yes, so they have a lot of money, right? Where's all that money going?
I don't know.
To their kids?
Say to refugees.
Big houses.
Okay, good thing. We're giving a lot of money to refugees. We're giving a lot of money to Palestinians. We're giving a lot of money to all these people. We're giving a lot of money here, there, right?
Right.
What about the money to invest in technology? Where's the Elon Musk of the Muslim Ummah? Where are these Muslim entrepreneurs developing businesses and things?
Yeah, but isn't that only going
to Muslims don't
isn't
big.
business? But isn't business only going to come when you have like stability?
No, not necessarily. Muslims in the West are doing very well for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's because Muslims don't think big.
That's what I'm trying to say. There is a certain level of thinking in this ummah that is not looking at the future.
Yeah, they're not thinking. They're small-minded.
That's the point I'm trying to make. We don't invest in the future. We're investing in band-aids, and we're investing in trying to revive a past that no longer exists. I want to create a mentality through this sort of movement, intellectual futurism, where Muslims completely invest in things that that don't exist yet, but can and will.
Mm-hmm.
For an evident future where our children or our children's children can benefit most from these things. I also want to address things like career choices, like you mentioned. Why are there so many Muslim medical doctors and engineers? For God's sake, no offense.
Because I'm good at it.
I agree. Why?
Okay, so what about my field? I would like to advance a movement, or even maybe make an organization where I start to promote the idea that Muslims should be librarians. Now you're probably thinking that's creepy, that's weird. Why is that necessary? Why would you need librarians?
No, I think it's good.
Why? But think about a lot of Muslims will ask me like, what's the point of that? What's productive about that?
Yeah, why do you want to become a librarian?
About it. What if Muslims had all access to information around the world? Actually,
you mean like Google?
Not just through Google, but actually controlled the flow of information.
You mean like a Muslim-owned Google?
Okay, so what was the most prominent thing about the early Muslim community prior to the advancement of science?
Prior to the advancement of science
in the Muslim world? Huh?
Was it knowledge?
We used to have crazy libraries.
We had libraries afterwards, yes, but what did the Muslims do prior to advancing technology and science in the Ummah? There was a movement that happened during the Umayyad period.
No, I don't know.
They translated everything around them.
Wait, say that again?
They were translating and collecting as much information as possible.
Mm-hmm.
They were learning about everything around them. They were modifying text. They were making commentaries on text. Essentially, they were functioning as librarians prior to even advancing a lot of these things. They were learning as much as they could, preserving information. Muslims are still credited to this day for preserving the Greek tradition. Why?
Because we did.
Because we did, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So libraries or librarians or information specialists, whatever you want to call them, were essential to the golden age back then. So they can be essential now to a new one. Muslims don't like reading anymore. I don't know if you noticed that.
No, they don't. I think people in general don't read.
No, yeah, but Muslims in general, we should be at the forefront of preserving information, of not even that, but even free expression, lacking censorship. And what I mean by that is, I'm not saying we should be okay with blasphemy. What I'm trying to say is that Muslims, before anyone else, we're preserving heretical text. We're preserving, other ideas that were opposed to Islam because they wanted to learn everything around them. That's how they were successful in developing things, and also in incorporating other societies into the larger polity, and even conquering other civilizations, because they knew who they were talking to and who they were dealing with.
You gotta know your enemy.
We don't know anything now because we don't even bother to research anything about the world or to preserve the knowledge that we have around us.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
These are abstract things. I know these are very vague things that I'm talking about. What about other professions? Not just the engineer, not just the medicine, the medical doctor. What about teachers? Why don't we promote being a teacher in our ummah anymore? We don't have that. We always put our lowest achievers in the position of scholarships.
Yeah, that's true.
Why are we failing? Because we have an idea. Is it really that we're looking towards the future, or is it because we're focused more on the present?
Present.
Yeah. We want money. We want to be successful right now. But if the idea of Islamic futurism essentially is to change that mentality, to think about what's going to happen in the future, to focus on the future, and to say, okay, let's invest because we're going to be somewhere else at some point. But Muslims don't think about the future right now. They're not investing in anything. Not even their own akhirah. There are so many Muslims out there who are so focused on just making a paycheck. And they think that that's okay, that they actually think that's part of their faith to do that. And I think that's a mentality that has been pushed, especially, and I'm going to be frank, by Arab society.
Oh, they have to make money?
That's essentially materialism is a very big aspect of.
Yeah. Well, I also think it's probably even more.
We don't really have anything else besides ourselves at this current point right now, isn't it? Like, we don't have a centralized leadership. We don't.
Yeah, but these things don't come out of thin air. We can't just establish them and then everything will work. If you don't change the mentality, nobody's going to care. It's not going to work anyway. Everyone's out for themselves. Everyone wants what's presently going to work in the present moment. We're never going to get ahead. Like I said, the things that I'm talking about are vague because I need to work out the details more. But the point I'm saying is that Muslims are thinking too much about the past for the present and nothing for the future.
Yeah.
We think it's just going to pop into our lap if we just work hard enough. And it's like, no, that's not going to happen. You have to work in a certain way, in a certain direction. And right now, Muslims don't have anything that guarantees our future in this world. We have nothing. We literally have nothing. I know that sounds really pessimistic, but
no, but what are you trying to look for?
No, would an example of forward thinking be like Al Institute by Daniel and Yaqeen Institute? Those kind of things. But even that is reactionary. Even that
steps in the right direction in terms of relieving doubts, but it's about an immediate problem. I'll even admit right now, Yaqeen Institute is about immediate issues.
100%. No, yeah.
I want to focus on an organization, a way of thinking, methodology that focuses on something 100 years from now. One of the reasons the Jews are so successful is because they did just that.
Yeah.
You ever hear of blockchain?
What do you know about Bitcoin?
Blockchain. That's if you want future thinking, Muslims need to be on blockchain.
Decentralized.
But imagine if we had
decentralized caliphate.
Not a centralized politics. Let's think about that for later. But imagine if we had our own. Okay, let's start at the ulama. There are various schools and madrasas around the world, right?
Yes.
But they're not united at all. Like Al-Azhar and Medina University don't.
Yeah, in recent years.
There's no conformed Islamic education. There's no unified Islamic education.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can still get scholars from these various institutions, obviously, that are very learned, but why is it that there's no unified Islamic education system? The Vatican has it.
No, but that centralization, that's dangerous. Having that centralization is dangerous.
They have a centralized seminary. No, it's not dangerous. It's exactly what we had for a long time.
Yeah.
If you had your ijazah from certain scholars, you were considered a scholar, right? But nowadays, you don't know where to go. I mean, you can go to Al-Azhar, sure, but then some people reject you. You go to Deobandi school or something, but then somebody over there will reject you. Nobody's recognized officially. There needs to be an official recognition across the board from every country that if you go here, you will be accepted. Right?
Yeah.
There's no centralized education system. What else are we lacking?
I mean, you just need a militarized and
Well, is there a hub?
Industrialized, militarized, complex. Kennedy's talking about.
Is there a hub in the Muslim world right now for the advancement of technology and science?
Saudi Arabia. Yes.
King Fahad, University of Petroleum. I'm trying to think.
Well, honestly, is there any place in the world a Muslim can guarantee right now if they went there they could advance science and technology?
Probably like House, King Abdullah University.
Malaysia. Yeah, House is good. King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. I've been there.
No, I mean honestly, as a hub.
Turkey as a hub.
Like there's nobody in the world that's going, or non-Muslims going, I need to go there. They're going to fund my research.
No, there aren't. It's the opposite. There's people going to the West.
Now imagine some rich Saudi sheikhs or rich Emirati sheikhs funded an organization for funded all of the highest advanced research in the world. From all
they probably do. It's just probably under researched. I think no. Also, I think you're being a bit overly pessimistic.
No, I am pessimistic because it's true. There's no experiment. There's no place right now in the Muslim world that anyone can consider a hub for any advancement of technology or science in the world today, and that you wouldn't go there and consider it a research one university even. My point is, we have a lot of money and a lot of resources, but we don't have enough forward thinking. But if we had enough funding for these things, do you think these scientists would stay in Germany or Italy? Imagine if they got a bigger fund from Dubai.
Yeah.
I think we're thinking quite materialistically here. We're thinking
part of it is material.
We're thinking about science, if we just progress in science, if we just get more money, if we just
certainly.
What's the benefit at the end of the day? What's the benefit of doing all this science? Who are we trying to impress?
What are we trying to do? Better our own civilization.
I mean, right, but I guess for example, Muslims don't manufacture their own cars.
Yeah, but what's the benefit? Yeah, what's the benefit of that at the end of the day?
We don't manufacture anything.
We make oil and we make plastic and stuff.
Listen. Bob, you're asking what's the benefit?
Yeah, what's the benefit? We're
you're not relying on other industries.
We are completely dependent on everyone else.
You're dependent. You're not self-sufficient.
We're good diplomats then.
We don't even. I mean, we literally at this point in our existence, as a society, as civilization, I am the first to. I am not the first to admit this, and I won't be the last. And I'm not afraid to admit this because we have a serious problem. We are no longer the gem of the world, and we don't even give anything in terms of as a society as a whole. Yeah, as individuals, yes. When we go other places, we give. We have a lot of talent, a lot of money, and a lot of resources, but we're not putting it in the right places. Do you see what I'm trying to say? There is so much that we as Muslims can do that we're not doing.
So what's the solution?
Huh?
Is the solution the book?
No, the solution is to change people's minds and mentality. Obviously, the book is, for me, is my way of expressing these issues and hopefully moving people towards a different way of thinking. And even if I convince one person, I'm hoping that'll be enough. But it's the same thing with and I want to be clear that I don't put myself on the same level as any of these people. But you know, when Al-Ghazali wrote his books, what do you think he was expecting? He was just trying to help people through his own experiences and trying to understand the world around him. He was trying to refute these specific philosophers because he felt the Ummah was in danger and he wanted to advance things. He wanted to move things forward. Like anyone else writes books. You know, they want to put their ideas out there hoping that something will catch, something will bite, so that they can hopefully change the world for the better in some way. And that's what I want to do, is my contribution. And, you know, if I end up not seeing it in my lifetime, maybe if I die and it happens after that, that'll be fine. But the point is, I have to do it. I feel obligated to do so. It's my moral obligation to do it, because I need to manifest my ideas for the betterment of other people. And it's also selfish in some way as well, because I personally want to benefit from it. I personally want to see these things happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm tired of being in a civilization that is being stepped on every day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tired of it. But unlike the idiot terrorist who's going to go out there and blow himself up, I'm looking to the long run, because that's also part of the problem with terrorists today. One of the reasons that they have little value for life is because they're not thinking about the future.
Yeah.
They only think about right now.
All right, yeah, that makes I agree with that. I think just Muslims having their own, just by creating your own platform, your own spaces, and you're talking about these ideas, that's already like kind of a bit of a shift, because now you're gonna move people to start thinking about these things.
Well, I don't know what's going to happen, but you know, it's what I have to do. And say if I write this book and maybe nobody believes it, or maybe nobody follows it, but then one day, maybe somebody who's better than me picks it up and finds something in there worth using. Mm-hmm. And then maybe they write a book that's much better than mine. And that ends up doing something. All ideas are synthetic at the end of the day.
Yeah,
every major philosopher, every major thinker that you've ever encountered in your readings or your life always got something from somebody else. In some way, they were influenced. So.
Yeah, solid. To wrap up,
I think that covers everything. Fahad, no, that's pretty good. I think because it was pretty in depth. We covered a lot of stuff that I wasn't expecting, which was good for me.
Yeah.
Where can people reach you? I travel, you know.
Like online and stuff.
Online.
Well,
get on the Turkestan Discord for all our listeners.
Yeah.
Well, Discord. Not everyone has Discord though, but like, yeah.
I mean, this sounds kind of negative as well, but recently I've kind of sort of distanced myself a lot from the whole scene. I do comment from time to time, but I'm trying to focus a lot on myself and kind of like writing articles and things right now in the book, because I eventually kind of want to get out of this arena of dawah that's persisting right now. And a lot of it has to do with my own personal struggles. But, I'm still on Facebook. I'm still Discord a little bit, YouTube. You can find my channels there and stuff. And I'm still going to be making videos for a little bit of time. But eventually, I just want to kind of live a quiet existence. Because what a lot of people don't understand, and I think they don't realize, is that for people who do this, who are always in conflict with other people in terms of their ideas and spirituality and things, and who are constantly arguing with people, it really drains you and it hurts you a lot, actually. And it's just gotten to a point with me, ever since I converted to Islam, I've been doing this for 11 years straight, nonstop. And it's just gotten to a point where, like, I feel drained. Like, I just need to take a break. And I don't know if I'm coming back or not, but, for the time being, I'm going to put everything I got into it. And hopefully one day I'll be reinvigorated. And I'll have the motivation again. But
you should take on students.
What?
You should take on students. You should have you should become a mentor to.
I don't know if I don't think I'm worthy of that. That's the thing. I'm just, for me, it's always been a loner thing for me. It's like I've always been alone, and I've always been part of organizations to help, not to be a singular identity. I don't know where I'm going to be going in the future, and I'm sorry to end on this sort of like very kind of sad.
Wait, how old are you? You can't be more than 40.
I'm 34.
34. Yeah, you're still young.
Yeah,
I'm still very, very, very young.
I feel old because of all this, and it gets to you after a while.
The Prophet ﷺ never got his mission until the age of 40, right?
Oh, yes, and the thing is, maybe I don't have any reason to complain, but the point that I'm trying to make is that it is hard work. It's hard on the spirit. It's hard on your emotions. It's hard on your psychology. It's hard on everything. And,
it's hard on finances too, even.
Yeah, it's hard on finances, And when you struggle to do these things every day, and you do your best, and yet you see Islamophobes who get on a video for like 5 seconds and say, "I don't like Islam," and they get like 100,000 people supporting them in a few minutes. It's like, and you're sitting here and you're struggling for years just to reach people, like one person. It
takes a toll on you. Yeah,
and it's something that I've expressed to you, before in person and stuff. And I'm just trying to let people know the reason I'm saying this is that don't take things for granted. Don't take other people's efforts for granted. And if you can support something, even if you don't support that person, do your own best to spread a message so that you can relieve the burden off of those individuals. Because there are so many times that every day I get approached by people asking me questions and asking me to do things. But then in the same way, when I ask them to do things, they don't want to, or they're not willing to, or they think they're incapable, or they don't want to invest the time or the energy,
Well, what do you mean by that?
They want to put everything on one person.
Like, can you give an example of maybe an incident like this?
Well, I mean, just several occasions. It's just that they expect more from you than they're willing to give themselves. They want to say that dawah is an obligation, and it is in many respects. But then they want to put all their hopes and everything into one individual or only a certain amount of people, while they themselves still live their normal lives, quiet and away from all of these things. And if you're not willing to support these efforts, if you're not willing to put in as much effort as the people trying, putting themselves on the front lines, don't expect them to take on the burden for that long. Because even the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, tried to share his burdens. They didn't just sit back while he did all the work and then, wave their flags around in support in the background.
Yeah.
They fought with him. They died alongside him. So part of the problem with this ummah, and part of the reasons I wanted to sort of also look and sort of promote this Islamic futurism is because you get what you give. And if you're not willing to give and to invest your time and your emotions and your own intellect into these projects, into the dawah of others, when they're trying to go on the front lines, if they're waving the sword out and they're going, let's go into battle, and there's nobody behind them, don't expect success.
So what should people do then?
Well, they need to start supporting these sort of projects more, like your
or even
Yaqeen, everywhere else. They need to start spreading the message, marketing themselves, unifying together under one banner for one goal. We need to stop being petty and stop being lazy and stop thinking only about ourselves and our immediate experiences and goals. We need to start thinking for the future. And, you have a lot of Muslims online who keep complaining about our youth leaving the religion, complaining about this, complaining about that. But what have you seen people do?
Yeah, they haven't done anything.
What they do is complain. I've seen people complain about Yaqeen Institute. Oh, they're not doing it right. They're not doing it right. They're not doing this. They're not doing that. What are they doing? Watching, cricket games and integral series or whatever, and sharing memes online about stupid things, which is fine to some degree. But if that's all you're going to do while you're critiquing and complaining all day, then what's going to happen? So sorry to leave on a sad note, a pessimistic note, but my point is like, Muslims need to change their mindset. don't expect so much from the people who are trying to do stuff like you guys and myself and everyone else, and support everyone as best as you can. It doesn't have to be financially.
Even like just leaving a good comment or sending a nice
That
message.
That helps me because there are days where like I'm so down in the dumps, and just seeing a comment from somebody that I've never met saying that your work has helped me or helped somebody else, that makes me keep going.
Yeah, no, 100%. I even feel that as well. Like I feel very, very happy when people give me like a thumbs up or like on a video or like leave a really nice comment. Yeah, that keeps me going as well. Or if someone messages me out personally, even that's I get on top of the world for that day.
The more Muslims today seem more concerned about Nicki Minaj than they do about.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
It's annoying. So.
Yeah, and Asadullah puts in like maybe 100 times more effort than me and Ammar do with everything. So
yeah, no, 100%. I believe your content, your Asadullah, your content along with Daniel's, I actually think it's quite important because you critique liberalism in their own language per se, and you're able to break.
And these guys, they write like properly academic articles too and get it published, whereas like we just make podcasts and we just talk about stuff.
No, podcasts are important. I mean, you're creating a platform for people to speak when we don't have platforms today. I mean, we have to create our own platforms because nobody else is giving us one.
Yeah.
I mean, this is integral. You know, like you guys and Boys in the Cave and all them, they're doing as best as they can to give us voices. That when we're shouting from the abyss, and nobody wants to pick us up. You know, you guys are going down there and picking us up for them, trying to make a fair platform, especially online. That's essential. Yeah. The problem is whether the Muslims are willing to support those efforts, because we have a lot of Muslims today. Like I said, they complain. They know there are problems, but they refuse to do anything. Like they want everything to fall into their lap. And I'm sorry if that's like I'm bashing this ummah, but you need to slap people around sometimes to wake them up. And it's time for these Muslims to wake up before it's too late, because we're getting to a point now where it's like either you change the way you think or everything around you see is going to get worse. And it is getting worse. It's getting worse every day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, also another difference, I just want to let the listeners know that like Asadullah, he's put his entire like his livelihood in this, right? He's put his entire career in this as well. Okay, like he's had to at one point you've even had to like change what you're studying in order to like just keep up with finances, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, so go guys, just I'm gonna say it straight up, go support his Patreon.
No, you don't have to. My point is, just having that support, being able to get our message out, that would be sufficient for me.
Yeah.
If my content could rival the popular Islamophobes online, I'd be happy. But right now, I have, alhamdulillah, I have enough support where I can say that there are Muslims out there who care. Like, having 10,000 followers on Facebook is a decent thing. It's not something to scoff at or to sit here and be like, oh, I feel so, whatever. But why is it that there are fewer Muslims willing to support the work that we're trying to do to combat Islamophobia and all this nonsense out there, and there are so many more people willing to support those hateful people, those hateful individuals? Why is it that an idiot, a literal idiot, somebody with below average intelligence with no formal education, can have 100,000 something followers on a social media platform and spread their message to the point where they're getting the attention of people that don't even have the right to be talking to? And yet people who have struggled to study and have sacrificed so much, not myself particularly, but like a lot of other people who are actually doing real researching and trying to spread good content, put all their time and energy, can barely get, a few hundred views or 5,000 or 10,000 people supporting their work and spreading it around. You can't battle these bad ideas this way. Where are the Muslims? Where are they? That's what I'm asking. Where are they? There are more of us than there are of these idiots. Where are you?
That's a good question.
Watching cricket, man. Watching cricket.
You don't want this ummah to die, but you are letting it die. Where are you? That's all I'm trying to say. And it gets frustrating, and I'm tired of it. I'm really tired of it. I've almost given up completely on everyone. There are days where I just want to drop everything and just be like, screw it. You guys kill yourselves off. I'm going to go enjoy my life. Because honestly, it's hard to put so much emotion and time into other people when they don't care about themselves.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I sound really mean. But that's how I really feel. And I'm sorry. But that's just how I feel. And I don't know how else to feel right now. So
that's fine.
Inshallah. I think you should keep going. We got you on the support. We'll spread the message.
After 11 years straight.
Part time, no. Like, you can do what you need to do. If you need to take a break, but just don't disappear, okay?
Yeah, I mean that's what people keep telling me, but it's like,
just don't disappear. You can keep it on the low. But
this is how I feel. This is literally what's in my heart right now. This is like how I feel. Like every day, my belief in this, like apathy of wanting to be apathetic, increases. Because I'm not seeing people coming to the stage going, okay, like we need to start doing this, we need to fix this, let's do this, let's do that. There are very few, and it boggles my mind that there are so many people complaining but not willing. So many Muslims complaining and wondering what's going on in the world, but they don't want to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it. I do, but I don't. That's why I want to write this book, because I'm hoping to God that it'll plant some seed.
Yeah, inshallah will.
So, inshallah. So, okay, I'm done.
Should we wrap up?
Yeah, and I apologize for any vulgar words that I use, etc. I don't mean to be like that. I'm just being blunt.
It's good.
I'm irritated, so I apologize.
You can be rude with us. It's cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wrap up.
Okay, wrap up.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. صدق الله العظيم. Yo, Asadullah, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and we hope for the best for you in the future and akhirah, and we ask Allah to make things easy for you. And we ask the viewers as well to make things easy for us and share our content and like pay us. I'm just kidding. As well, and send us words of encouragement, inshallah. I mean, ya Rab. And then for you guys you guys are not Allah, so like just do what I say.
Okay.
Take care, guys.
Okay. So I'm gonna